Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Are all Northmen as pig-headed as you? Talisa said. The healer from Volantis meant well, but the 3 crossbow bolts had been cut out of his body. Removing the quarrel that pierced the chest was difficult. The wound had to be enlarged and deepened so that Talisa could remove the bolt head with a pair of small and hollow tongs. Jon washed the wounds with a mixture of white wine, honey, and vinegar. And after checking that no dirt or metal remained, wrapped bandages of linen and flax around his shoulder, right arm, and chest. He would use wine and soft sponges to keep the dressings moist. Not all Northmen, but we are Starks, Rob said as he walked into the tent. His battle companions, drawn from the high-born heirs of the North and the Rivermen, stayed outside, exchanging raucous war stories and well-deserved slaps on the back. Jon did not need guards. 3 dire wolves sprawled near him, curled up together and resting after the battle, and a large meal of honeyed chicken and a haunch of roast goat. Lady Talisa, I thank you for your concern, but I am well enough to rise. Jon grimaced. He stood up and chewed a large slug of white willow bark. Ghost perked up his ears. You were badly injured. Had the bolts hit bone, you may have lost an arm or worse, she said. But they didn't, and I haven't. I won't rest when I can save lives, Jon said. The healer stomped out in frustration, stuffing linen dressings into the duskin bag with hands flecked with blood. Jon frowned. She should really wash her hands first. She is a spirited one, Rob said, looking at her slim figure with admiration. Jon rolled his eyes. She is a good healer. Bit bossy, though. He rubbed the white wolf's thick fur, and Ghost and Nymeria nipped playfully at Jon's uninjured left arm. Grey Wind sniffed and maintained a regal air. Rob turned serious. Small Jon says he fought off 3 Lannister men at the same time. That saboteurs led by Ramsay Dustin tried to bring down the wall. That number will grow larger in the retelling. Small Jon, Eddard Karstark, Brynden Blackwood, and Edmure Tully all fought well, else Ramsay would have succeeded. Ramsay is no Dustin, he is a Bolton, and his men and hounds come from the Dreadfort, Jon said. When I asked whether his father or the Lannisters sent him, he only smirked. But how do you know? We have never seen Ramsay with Rose Bolton, Rob said. Steelshanks is a Bolton man, and Ramsay has the same small, cold, pale eyes, Jon said. Lord Bolton pushed me into attacking the supply wagons. Only a few thousand sellswords guarded the train. But it was a clever trap. The reserve and other Westermen riders would have flanked us. Rob said, How did the Lannisters send messages to Lord Bolton? Jon shrugged. I do not know. But what will you do with Rose Bolton? What can I do? There is no real proof. Attacking the wagons and splitting the Lannister army in half was reasonable. I would not blame any of my commanders for the attempt. And Steelshanks is a single man. We need more to bring a great lord to justice. Rob said, Bolton is a danger. His son wanted my skin for a cloak. His men are scum, and the hounds are vicious beasts. The son is a shadow of the father, Jon said. We cannot kill him offhand, Jon, not without proof. Father always said the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. I am not ready, even if we should, Rob said. Bolton will not swing a sword, or at least not from the front, Jon thought. He will betray us, Rob. We should let him. What is your plan? Rob asked. Roose Bolton is a clever man. We are not likely to catch him with a raven, Tywin. Let him make contact with the Lannisters. What he knows, Tywin will know. We can use that. We can prepare for his betrayal. A knife in the front is better than a knife in the back, Jon said. 2,000 of our men are Boltons, and hundreds more Rosiers and Dustins. Rob said, We do not know if those houses are traitors as well. We should separate Rose Bolton from any potential allies. Have you sent riders to pursue the Lannisters? Jon asked. Rob shook his head. The Blackfish and I commanded almost all the cavalry. The feigned retreat worked, but it was not easy. Many men were injured, it took a great deal of time, and the horses are exhausted. The men and the horses need rest. Send Rose Bolton to pursue. If he actually kills any Lannisters, that would help. But if he doesn't, he will betray our plans to Lord Tywin. Keep House Roswell and House Dustin here, and watch their commanders closely. Jon said, We can ill afford to lose 2,000 men, Rob lamented. You have lost them already. Would you trust Rosa Bolton at your back in battle? Jon said. We need to accept that we have been betrayed. Only then can we make them pay. Rob nodded and called Grey Wind to his side. I have to speak to the lords to see how great our losses were. We need to know how many men the Lannisters have left. Send the injured to me. I will save as many as possible, and then speak to the prisoners. Jon said. The brothers left the tent, and their dire wolves followed. It was well past midnight when the Winter Town boys announced that every last bit of herbs, from King's Copper to Sour Lead to Willow Bark, had been depleted. There was still boiling wine and a dozen bottles of vinegar left for emergencies, but the honey, mustard seeds, and nettle were gone along with the crushed aloe, the comfrey paste, and the pennyroyal leaves. Jon had sent messengers to every holdfast, village, and hall within 10 miles, proclaiming the northern victory and asking that any medicine or healers be sent. They had done yeoman's work that night, tending to injured Northmen, Rivermen, and Westermen, but there was nothing left. They would have to wait until more supplies were delivered in the morning. Giant vats of bone broth simmered in the open. A covered portico held several large fire pits and outdoor ovens to bake bread and roast meat. Prisoners dug public latrines. Men from both armies had been drafted to dig graves. The rank smell of so many men was overwhelming, even without the multitude of corpses. Snow, what are you doing with the bodies of our companions? Strongboar yelled. Even in chains, the Craycall Knight still blustered. The bald, fat man next to him only cowered. Lord Prester and Lord Lytton sat quietly, watched by a dozen armed Winterfell guards. Burying them, otherwise the stink will be even worse. Jon said. What about the Silent Sisters? They prepare the dead for a proper burial, Lord Prester said. Your men raped septas and burnt down seps. There are no Silent Sisters in these parts of the Riverlands. The bodies will decompose and carry disease, and if it rains, the smell will spread over everything. The graves are shallow. If you wish, you can return here after the war, exhume the bodies, and bring them home, Jon said. The Westermen digested that information. So you do not mean to kill us, or starve us and feed us to the wolves, or torture us and then kill us? Lord Prester said. That depends. Who is responsible for the carnage in the Riverlands? Who burnt the fields and sacked the towns? Who killed and raped women and children? Jon said. It was not us, Snow. I swear it on my house and my dead mother's soul. My men and I would not stoop to that. The Strongboar said. Lord Tywin released his goats and dogs. Gregor Clegane's men, Vargo Ho and his free riders, Amory Lork, those are the scum who committed the crimes, Lord Prester said. Then they will be hanged, every one of them. If I had more time, I would make them suffer. Where are they? These men that you blame for the crimes of the Lannister army? Jon said. You killed most of the Mountain's men. He brought over 1,000 and came back with less than 200 from the Red Fork. The Strongboard said. Lord Taclean was greatly wroth. Here Sloft squeaked. One half of the free riders are here. Hout and Lorch were told to hold Harrenhal in Lord Tywin's name, and as for the Mountain's men, they crossed the Red Fork again for the battle. I doubt more than a few dozen survived, maybe less. Lord Prester said, You will give them to me for execution. All of them will die for their crimes, and if I find that you lied, I will hang your knights. 10 of yours for each one you refuse to surrender, and I will find out. Chet, take Swift to look over the prisoners. When he finishes, take Craycall next, and then Prester and Ledden. Bring every captured lord to look for these men, Jon said. Some are injured, seared and resting. Lord Leo Lefford broke both his arm and leg when he fell. Lord Robin Moreland lost an eye. Clytus said, He will lose another if he refuses. Get them up. By the morning, I want all the scum delivered to me, or I will serve their justice to the highborn. Jon said. Jon left to get rest, with Ghost and Nymeria at his side. Outside his tent, wolves crouched and tucked their tails as the dire wolves passed. He slept deeply and dreamed of dragons. The men loudly ordered drinks and food, and the innkeep, potboy, and serving maids rushed to bring out jacks of ale and bowls of beef and bacon stew. The unlucky hog, a few miles from Bitterbridge, bustled with activity as 24 gold cloaks, armed with black mail armor, iron cudgels, and iron spears, jested and japed. Boasts of fighting prowess filled the common room. The noise covered a quiet conversation in a small private room upstairs. Petyr Baelish covered his elegant plum-colored doublet with a plain blue cloak. 2 fighters stood guard near the door, out of whispering range. One was an imposing giant of 6'6", with brown hair, a hooked nose, and a trimmed beard. The other was stocky and more plain-looking with nappy gray hair and a squashed nose. Lothar Brune, quiet and middle-aged, was a more skilled sword than Osmond Kettleblack, but did not look it. Petyr sat with 2 men. One was garbed in white robes with a small crystal dangling on a fat neck, and the other dressed in brown homespun of a penitent, but the manicured hands showed no signs of begging. With a smile, Baelish took out a plain bag with 6 tiny purple crystals, the Strangler. You will find Renly Baratheon at Bitterbridge. Given him the gift. His arm and his chest throbbed with pain when Jon woke up. He had dreamt of a black dragon, so great that an entire horse could ride down its gullet and be swallowed whole. The riverlands were burning from dragon flame, and nobles and smallborn ran panicked from the terror on the trident. You are a dragon, the voice whispered. A dragon does not fear. He broke his fast with 2 soft-boiled eggs. Nymeria and Ghost still slept, their backs together, and Jon wondered if the 2 had wolf dreams. With care, he strapped the bastard sword to his left side, and a dagger to the right. He studied 2 lists, one with the dead and the 2nd prisoners. A score would be valuable hostages. Several dozens more were knights and second sons, but a vast number of prisoners were small folk. The bulk of the Lannister knights had crossed the river under Sarah's and Amrabrand, and died charging the ballista. Their bodies would be stripped of armor, weapons, and valuables and buried in the trenches. Jon stepped out into the open air with 2 yawning dire wolves. 3 large poles, hammered into grass, supported a sturdy horizontal wooden triangle, 15 feet up in the air. Nooses were already thrown over each of the legs, and dangled 8 feet in the air. 4 carts packed with tied-up prisoners were guarded by the Wintertown boys and Tully men. A crowd of small folk had gathered, ready for the hanging. Please, sir, we were only following orders. The speaker was an old stoop-shouldered man with cracked yellow teeth. His right arm, crushed from a stone hurled from a catapult, was still encased in mail. He is a liar, a woman screamed. They tortured my boy. They cut off his fingers with knives before he died. She pointed to a man of medium height and build with an ordinary face. The man was entirely forgettable, yet except for cold, dead eyes. My lord, they deserve to suffer worse than hanging. They raped my daughter, a burly man said. You may be correct, but death is the normal punishment. Jon's eyes narrowed. After surrendering, the prisoners had been put in chains or bound with rope. Bows, spears, and swords had been taken away, but some still had knives. One carried a small, slender blade with Mikken's mark on the hilt. Jon drew needle from the gray scabbard. When he was 8, this had been his first sword, and now it seemed only a thin stiletto. Where did you get this? He directed the question to a bald, stocky man, with big ears and a large jaw with black bristles. I took it from a boy we captured, only it turned out to be a girl, Polliver said. And where is this boy or girl now? Jon said. Ran away from Harrenhal, the man shrugged. You can have the blade if you want, sir. It is not yours to give. Jon felt Nymearia's hot anger, but these were scum and not worthy of attention. It was their masters that he wanted to bring to heel. The Mountain's men were like Ramsay's hounds, frothing dogs that deserved to die. Jon motioned to the small folk. I will not allow torture, but these men killed your friends and family. The quicker they die, the better. You may help hang them. Grim men eagerly came forward. In but a moment, dozens of necks were broken, and the bodies thrown into an unmarked mass grave to be forgotten. A large map of Westeros draped over a fine walnut table, both scavenged from a Lannister wagon. Silver stags marked 3 locations: King's Landing, the site of the battle, and River Run. The lords and commanders crowded the tent, but they made a path for the 2 dire wolves and Jon Snow. Rob was surrounded by the Tales, his lady mother, the Blackfish, and Sir Edmure. Rob motioned for Sir Brynden to begin. We had 17,000 men going into the battle. We have 2,000 dead, but another 2,000 injured. It will take weeks for them to fully recover. Lord Tywin had over 25,000. We count over 11,000 dead, half north of the Red Fork, and 1,500 prisoners. The Blackfish said, So even after our victory, the Lannister army is as large as ours, Rob grimaced. The Lannisters also have many injured. Men did not flee unscathed. Lord Mallister argued. The sellswords and free riders may have abandoned them. They had over 2,000 at the battle. The Blackfish said. Enough of these numbers. Shall we march for King's Landing? The Greatjon said. The Lord of the Last Hearth wanted things plain and simple. What is the strength of the Crown lands? Are they loyal to the Lannisters? Jon asked. He referred to the lands that stretched from Maidenpool to the Stormlands. There were many settlements and holdfasts, but by people, the Crown lands were based around Blackwater Bay, with the two ports of Duskendale and King's Landing. Stannis raised a few thousand men, but in the past, the mainland lords could call armies of more than 5,000. The Lannisters have not called these banners yet. The lands are so close that they will not rebel against the throne. The Blackfish said, the prisoners say the Iron Throne has recruited more gold cloaks to defend King's Landing. The men in the City Watch have swelled from 2,000 to 5,000. The Lannisters may use that to strengthen their forces, but I doubt if new recruits are well trained. There would be many sellswords as well in the capital, Jon said. King's Landing is 4 days' ride, but we do not have the men. In time, the Lannister army will reassemble. And with the bannermen in the Crown lands, their numbers will grow again. We cannot take the city. Robb said, Lord Stark, we have beaten longer odds before. Gacy Mormont said, yes, but not in a siege. King's Landing has thick walls and the Red Keep is a strong castle, Robb said. We need to scout ahead. Lord Bolton, take your men into the Crown lands. If you find pockets, give battle. If you find the main host, then send a messenger back. Lord Stark, I will do so. But if our army does not have enough men, how will that change? Rosierds Bolton whispered, I will determine that, my lord. For now, I want the army to heal, and I intend to control the River Road, the King's Road, and the High Road, Road said. Jon wondered what else Robb was leaving unsaid. His brother clearly did not want to show all his plans to the Leech Lord. Nymeria prodded Greywind, and the 3 dire wolves left the tent. Nymeria was eager to run, and Jon would follow. Arya woke up to the hungry cries of children. The inn at the Crossroads swarmed with them, boys and girls, whose parents were dead, missing, or had simply left. There had been 100 little houses in the village nearby where crofters scratched out a small life on farms and raising sheep for wool and milk. Those farms had been burnt down, and the sheep eaten. Life was better at the inn than the abandoned houses. Here, they had a little to eat. Donations from a wandering brother handing out sacks of seeds, oaten, porridge, flour, and barley bread. The Septon visited once a week. A big man, 6 feet tall, even hunched over. Large leathery hands with dirt under the nails and black horned feet. He walked shoeless, with a quarterstaff, and his donkey carried the food. If Arya's brain was not muddled by hunger and fear, she might have wondered how a Septon with a donkey could evade Lannister foragers. Yesterday, the pushy 10-year-old Willow and her suspicious older sister Jane ordered that no fires be lit. The Heddles had gotten wind of the battle, and the inn was locked up tight, with no lights and no noise. They ate cold porridge and stale bread, huddled in darkness with a few crossbows ready. In the night, horses galloped by without stopping, and Arya saw Lannister colors in the dark. When she closed her eyes, she tasted meat and felt warmth. 2 sensations missing from the inn at the Crossroads. She dreamt of wolves dancing and singing that night. Breakfast that morning was a thin gruel, tiny barley groats, boiled in water. Bits of brown cabbage and red beets floated in her wooden bowl. Even in her hunger, Arya disliked beets. There will be dead horses from the fighting. We could sneak out and get horse meat. I could roast it under the coals. No one would even see a fire. Hot pies. And what if you get caught? You might lead them back to this inn. Jane Seattle snapped. We don't know if the battle is over, or who has won, Jandry said. My brothers will win, Arya thought stubbornly. In the past week, she had wanted to cross the 5 miles to the Red Fork. There were thousands of Westermen patrolling, and travelers said that all the bridges were flooded or guarded. She swallowed a spoonful of bitter gruel. A little boy, half naked, ran into the common room, gasping for breath. Pat, what are you doing outside? It could be dangerous. Willow scolded. I saw them coming near the river, he said. Willow was about to ask more, but then the howl of wolves answered. The girl rushed to close the door, but the howling became louder. Gray shapes darted around the inn, and they would hear snarling and snapping. I could see several dozen figures, gray and black and tawny brown, hidden in shadows and behind trees. Ep8 screamed and ran upstairs. Gendry reached both his hands for his warhammer. The heavy iron head had a long spike on the back. The Heddles wound their crossbows and aimed out the windows. Hot Pie shook in fear and gulped down his bowl of gruel. The wolves went silent. Then hoofbeats could be heard amid the whinny of horses. Riders dismounted outside. Heavily armored men with swords and axes. They ignored the wolves around them. The door swung open. A loud, boisterous voice with the distinctive accent of the North cried out, "Drop the crossbow, girl." A smoke-gray dire wolf, lean and as tall as a small horse, strutted into the common room. Hard yellow eyes looked around until it saw her. Then a huge gray dire wolf with a white belly jumped through an open window. Hot Pie squeaked and dove under a table. Arya stepped forward, trembling and unsure. The last dire wolf appeared suddenly at her side, white as snow, with hard garnet eyes. She had never even heard the white wolf sneak behind her. Ned Stark. The speaker was young but still a man grown, with a long face, dark brown hair, and eyes so brown they looked black. He wore all black over his mail, but there was a white dire wolf emblazoned over his heart. Arya ran and jumped into the waiting arms of Jon Snow. He embraced her tightly, like he would never let her go. Arya was surprised that tears rolled down her face. After the horrors of the last few months, she had forgotten she could still cry. Jon held her as several others. Men, a tall woman, and older boys walked into the room. When he finally let her go, the Heddles knelt on the floor, and a wary Gendry placed the warhammer down and stepped in front of a cowering Hot Pie. "My lord, welcome to the inn at the Crossroads," the older Heddle girl stammered. "Why are you kneeling?" Jon interrupted. "We don't want to offend you, Sir Snow." "Lord Snow," Willow said, keeping her head firmly bowed and eyes on the ground. "This must be how Rob feels all the time," Jon jested. "Rise. This is my brother, Jon Snow," Arya said. "And Jon, these are Gendry and Hot Pie. They helped me escape Harrenhal." Hot Pie's eyes popped and he looked ready to faint on the dirty floor. The Heddles turned hopeful, then Ghost snorted and sniffed from the young Heddle to a spot near the stairs. "What's under there?" Jon asked, not unkindly. The older Heddle gulped, and then lifted the trap door. Children crept out, ragged boys with unshorn locks and furtive girls, ready to skitter. A few young ones sobbed when they saw the armed men and the dire wolves. Others were silent as they waited their fate. "How many children are at this inn?" Jon asked. 50, my lord. Some are hiding upstairs in the rooms," Willow said. "How long have you been running the inn?" 4 moons, my lord," Willow said. Her brother looked at the 2 Heddles deep in thought. "Have them come out, every one." They poured out of the nooks, alcoves, and crannies. Arya had never seen all of them in one place. There was not enough food, and it had to be carefully rationed to last a week or longer. She was older than most in the room, and unlike the other children, her bones did not stick out. Hunger could be seen in their legs and arms, protruding ribs, and sunken faces. A boy with a cowlick wrapped thin arms about his chest, as if he was bracing for a beating. "Please, sir, don't eat us!" A burly man with wild reddish-brown hair roared in laughter. "And why would we do that? You are all skin and bones." "That means the wolves," Gendry said. "The wolves stuffed their bellies with Lannister men," the big man grinned. The tall, lanky woman shook her head. Arya admired the spiked steel morning star at her belt. "Sma Jon, you are scaring the children. I am Daisy Mormont. This idiot here is Sma Jon Umber, and this is Eddard Karstark, Darren Hornwood, and Brynden and Hoster Blackwood. I am also known as the Catapult," the man said, smiling. "What will happen to us, my lady?" Willow asked quietly. "The White Wolf will decide. We defeated the Lannister forces yesterday. You will not be harmed," Daisy said. She signaled to Tully guards, and they brought in saddlebags of dried meat and hard bread. Jon spoke softly to a sharp-eyed boy, who quickly left the inn to ride away. "Come on, sister, let's get some fresh air." "Wolves are happier outside," he said. Arya stepped into the courtyard. Several dozen men wearing Tully or Winterfell colors patrolled the perimeter of the inn, and their horses grazed next to all 3 roads. Grey Wind trotted fierce and proud, and Ghost roved silently next to his brother. Nymeria walked her own path, the she-wolf not deigning to look at Arya. "Do you think she will ever forgive me? I had to throw rocks to drive her away. I hit her twice and she whined before she ran." Arya said sadly. Jon turned from his horse. "There is nothing to forgive, Arya. You chased her away so she would live. Nymeria saved me yesterday at the wall, and she found you this morning. She is yours and you are hers." He handed her a sword in a worn gray scabbard. Rosier drew the slender blade out with wonder. "Needle, but how? The Mountain's men took it." "The Mountain lives, but I killed most of his men across the Red Fork. I hung the few that were left, and I took your sword back," Jon said. He sat down on a bench, Ghost and Grey Wind playing at his feet. Above, ravens croaked and cawed. "Now tell me everything about King's Landing and your escape." As Arya began to spin her tale, the gray she-wolf approached and nuzzled her side. Arya spoke for a long time, her brother listening. Jon Snow had a rare ability to concentrate, and he absorbed her words without interruption. After she finished, he asked about the two men she heard plotting underneath the Rid Keep, and the exact words said at Father's execution. Her brother examined Jaqen H'ghar iron coin, and then used a parchment to trace the worn-down words and image, before returning it to her. "Yozier Bravos is known for the Iron Bank and the Faceless Men. This is their coin," Jon said. "Do you know about them?" Arya said, "No one does. They are from ancient Valyria, and these words are Valar Morghulis and Valar Dohaeris. All men must die, and all men must serve. The price for their aid is very high, more than sane men dare pay," he said. "I don't want to be weak. I want to kill them all. Cersei, Joffrey, Meryn Trant, the Hound, Ser Gregor, Alan Payne. Make me a water dancer and a wolf, and not afraid, ever again." Erzia said, "You are not weak, Arya. You have survived so much. We will get revenge for Father. I should have given Tywin Lannister as a name to Jaqen. This stupid war would be over. Robb and I both want that, but we would rather have you alive than Lord Tywin dead." Jon mussed her hair, and they sat together with the dire wolves in comfortable silence, until a large covered wagon rumbled into the yard, pulled by a team of drays. "Let's go back to the inn." They entered to raucous laughter. Smaug, Jon Umber, and Eddard Karstark stood on a long table, heads bumping against the roof, making great sweeping gestures with a greatsword and axe. Several Wintertown crew pretended to attack, flailing helplessly against the two beefy warriors. Some boys wore wooden bowls as helmets and could barely see or were turned sideways. "What is going on?" Jon asked. Smaug Jon is reenacting the Battle of the Three Wolves and how he defended the wall against Lannister men, Daisy said. "Only half a dozen? I thought the Smaug Jon said it was a score," Jon said. "Karstark and I had to save a few for the Rivermen," Umber cried. Brendan Blackwood scoffed. He and Hoster had better sense than to climb a rickety table. The door opened, and the smell of fresh bread wafted through the inn. Chet carried loaves in both hands, and men rolled casks and hefted sacks. "Master Snow, we took some fresh bread from the ovens, and the wagon has wheat flour, barley, bacon, poppy oil, dried beef, butter, wheels of cheese, dried fish, and sacks of onions, carrots, nuts, and beans. We even have a small pot of salt," Chet said. "We brought barrels of wine and ale too, Master," Clytus said. "I will take those, lads," Smaug Jon said, looking for mugs and jacks behind the counter. "Can we have some food, sir?" Willow Heddle asked. "The food is all for you, to feed the children at the inn. You took Arya in, even when you did not know her name, and for that you have my thanks." Jon said to the wide-eyed children, "Your inn is under my protection. If anyone threatens you, inform me, and if anyone hurts you, I will make that person pray for a quick death. I can bake bread. I know how to mill grain and knead dough. I can fire the oven and make the bread rise, my lord," Hot Pie said. The Heddles looked at the fat boy skeptically. Arya stepped forward. "His name is Hot Pie. He would know how to bake." Jane Heddle nodded immediately. "Of course, my lady. Whatever you wish. If you sit down, we would be happy to serve a meal." She gave a low curtsy. Hot Pie went back to the kitchen, and Jane Heddle oversaw the unloading of many barrels and sacks. Willow yelled at the children, and they pushed tables together to form 3 long rows. Some boys ran to get benches and chairs, while others carried heavy pails of water from the well. Some water went into the kitchen, but all the children were directed to wash up at a basin. The inn at the Crossroads, moribund even that morning, burst into life. Arya sat next to Jon as he discussed orders. The she-bear would travel east on the Trident with many guards to make certain the Lannisters did not control the waterway and the Bay of Crabs. Karstark and Small Jon would go the same route, but they would secure Saltpans first, and then join Dacey at Maidenpool. Hornwood and the Blackwoods would go north to make sure the lands around House Darry were clear of bandits. Pork pies, root soup, oat cakes, and skewers of meat and onions emerged from the kitchen. Arya devoured a round of bread stuffed with sizzling bacon, and the children fell on the food like starving wolves. Hot Pie's bread was delicious. After the lunch, Arya would ride west with Jon to find Rob and her mother. In all the excitement, she did not notice a large raven who nested near the inn, in plain sight of the common room. The lemon cakes went untouched as Lady Athory tried and failed to calm down a distraught Loras. The Night of Flowers raged, and the Tyrells wisely sent away the maesters and the septons to a far corner of Bitterbridge Castle. Ritzley Rathian died last night with splotches on his eyes and neck, a black tongue, and a purple face. When Archmaester Rebers was summoned in the morning, the healer could not understand how Renly choked to death, but the septons attributed the death to sorcery and the Red Witch. Garland and Willis watched with concern as Marjorie soothed her brother. The Tyrells were a close-knit family, and the plight of the youngest pained his siblings. His love, deep, pure, and childlike, had turned to despair. Only love could bring such pain. I would kill Stannis 1,000 times to bring Ratsley back, Loras cried. Hush, they say that Stannis prepares to leave Storm's End, make his way to Dragonstone. She held his head in her arms like a babe. To be brought down by a Red Witch from Ashai, all plans lose to magic. Olena said bitterly, Lady Allery took her son away, leaving the other Tyrells. Grandmother, Petter Baelish has sent another messenger. He is 5 miles away on the Rose Road. We have already delayed for several days. Willis said, How many men does he have with him? Olena asked. 24 gold cloaks from King's Landing, and Baelish claims that he is an envoy of the Iron Throne, Willis said. Why do we need to see this coin counter? Mace huffed. Because our side cannot win anymore, we have no one who could be king. Garland said, And what of the Riverlands? Is there any news? Olena said. Willis shook his head. Our spies have gone quiet. From Stony Sept to Maidenpool, there is only silence. The last news was Robb Stark's return to Riverrun, and that the young wolf plans to force Tywin Lannister into a great battle. Although there are stories that the old gods have granted Jon Snow powers, that he has the green sight, and can see things yet to come. More sorcery, the North and their blasted trees and wild beasts. Mace Tyrell scoffed. The Stark boy is too eager for battle. Lord Tywin is my equal in war. He will not be easily bested. We have to meet with Lord Baxley's. Stannis Baratheon is entirely unsuitable for many reasons, not the least of which the man has the personality of a lobster. Olena said, Baelor Hightower sought me out yesterday. Many at the Starry Sept are angered by the desecration of septs in the Riverlands. Sire Baelor says that if the Iron Throne does nothing, the swords in the stars may rise again to protect the faith. Garland said, But what does that all mean, and who do they blame for it? Marjorie said. They should blame Tywin Lannister for the mountain and his sellswords, but he is too powerful to attack, so we do not know. The game is getting more dangerous, Garland said. Why not just wait for the victor? Stay at Highgarden and keep our forces at home, Willis said. Olena scoffed. The cow has already been milked, and the cream cannot be squirted back. We have declared against the Iron Throne. If the Lannisters win, they may strip us of some lands. If Stannis wins, House Tyrell will be attainted. What if the wolves win? Garland asked. Then we will plan for that too. Olena said, Petter Baelish ignored the prissy Lord Caswell and made a straight line to the Tyrells. He had waited at the Unlucky Hog for days and was eager to make the offer. Like many clever boys, he disliked being in the dark, and his men in King's Landing had sent no news of the Northmen. Ah, Lady Olena, I rejoice to see you well. I thank House Tyrell for meeting me. Baelish said, Enough empty words. If I need a fool, I would call Butterbumps. What is the Iron Throne offering? Olena said. Tyrell guards were posted on all sides of the room. Wellis and Garland stood near their father. Mace Tyrell sat on an elevated chair, looking to all like a fat green flower tied to a stake. The Queen of Thorns drank tea in the corner with Marjorie and Allery by her side. Loras was dressed in the armor and cloak of the Rainbow Guard. An alliance, of course, a dream of spring and not bloody war in the Riverlands, a betrothal between King Joffrey and the Rose of Highgarden, Baelish said. My sister has a husband, Willis said coolly. Yes, but at King's Landing we hear that Renly is hurt and might not wake. And even if he did, would he be capable of giving your sister children? Baelish said. King Renly died last evening, Garland said. The eyes of the room were on Littlefinger. He clutched his hands to the plum velvet doublet in shock. I am sorry for your loss. I know he rose against the Iron Throne, but I was his friend in happier days. Lord snorted. You lie. Renly did not like you at all. He named you a whoremonger. The mockingbird showed no anger in the plastered smile. I do not deny who I am. It saddens me to hear of Renly's dislike, but it does not change the terms. I can offer a king in marriage, and that Tyrell blood will hold the Iron Throne. Surely that is what you want for Lady Marjorie. And what will it cost us? Olena said, the swords of the Reach. You would defend the honor of the new queen. And Stannis is an enemy of the crown, and Renly would get justice at your hands. Baelish said, and what of this Joffrey, who claims to be a stag and looks so much like a lion? Olena said, Joffrey is a good king, noble and true. Baelish said, do good kings order their betrothed stripped and beaten in front of the court? Olena said, lies spread by his enemies. Baelish said smoothly, Lord Baelish, that is what your gold cloaks say at the inn, that Joffrey is a spoiled brat, prone to anger, and that he is cruel and reckless, Wellis said. I never said he was perfect, Baelish said. Surely there is some way to settle this. Perhaps a seat on the small council or lands. We would need more than one seat on the council before I give up my beloved daughter, Mace declared. He shut up after a furious glare from Olena. We will need time to consider, but there is one more thing House Tyrell requires. Lady Olena said, Sansa Stark. Sansa Stark stared over Aegon's high hill from her room at the Tower of the Hand. She had been stuck here for 2 weeks, although she was not truly a prisoner. She had 2 airy rooms and servants. She had a writing table in the small hall, a room that could seat 200 where she could read or play the harp. There was no point in writing. The Lannisters would never allow a raven to be sent to her brother and mother. That morning, Sansa had woken, and after taking breakfast alone, sat by the large barred window to knit. She knit the same pattern with the same wool and the same needles, a gray dire wolf with soft yellow eyes. Lady was the smallest of the litter, dainty and trusting, so much that she had not expected the killing stroke by Lord Stark. Every day, Sansa knit a banner of Lady, and every night she tore the threads out, her sweet wolf lost forever from her own lies. The great wooden door opened and Tyrion Lannister stormed in. His squire followed, and the black-haired sellsword brought a large group of guards. Several mountain clansmen poured into the small hall, shouting questions and demanding answers. The chieftains of the clans shouted louder, and with a menacing set of gestures, forced their men out of the room. Wine? Podrick. The best bottle. We should drink everything we can, Tyrion said and sat down. The quiet boy rushed off and brought back a bottle of Arbor Gold. Tyrion poured the wine out into 3 silver goblets. She declined the offer. Sansa curtsied slightly. My Lord Hand, has something happened? You should tell her, dwarf. Everyone will find out soon enough, the sellsword said. Tyrion gulped down his glass and then took a large swig from Sansa's goblet. This morning, a begging brother started to preach on Cobbler's Square. He said that King's Landing was doomed, and that the filth of the city would be purged by fire, but beggars have said many things like that before, Sansa said. Yes, King's Landing is full of the criminally insane, but the preacher claims that his brothers and sisters in the faith saw the carnage in the Riverlands, that the Starks crushed the Lannister army and drove Lord Tywin from that field. Tyrion guzzled down more wine. But how do you know if this is true? Sansa asked. We don't, but the rumors continue. They say that Snow massacred the Lannister knights at the Red Fork, that he conjured an army of wolves and ravens, which devoured men alive, that he can warg into wolves and birds, and took no prisoners. The tales spread through every pot shop, wine sink, and alehouse in the city. Tyrion said with disgust, "Our maesters have sent ravens to Antlers, Maidenpool, and Harrenhal, but there is no response. People worry that this Snow may command the ravens to answer only to him." Podrick squeaked. "Of course there is no response. Maidenpool is 200 miles. A raven will not fly there and return until nightfall. We do not know if the Lannister army has been beaten." Tyrion snapped and then guzzled more wine. "You don't believe that, dwarf? These stories have too much detail. They claim that Jon Snow built a wall that could not be broken, and that Robb Stark would have killed your father on the field had it not been for the mountain. Sellswords know when men lose battles. If your father won, he would send a raven, announcing the victory," Bronn said. Tyrion poured another hefty slug of Arbor Gold and downed it. It was not yet noon, but half the bottle was gone. "Should he drink this much?" Sansa asked. In the shock of the news, she had forgotten her lady's courtesies. Bronn shrugged. "He thinks better when he is drunk. We need all the thinking we can get. The Northmen are still over 200 miles away. My father will have left a garrison at Harrenhal. That castle needs to be taken. And if the Starks march to Maidenpool and down to Duskendale, he may regroup his forces and ambush them there," Tyrion said. "Either that wine is shit, or you need a lot more. If Tywin retreats to Harrenhal, we are fucked. The Starks will just surround the castle and then send men down the King's Road. If this Jon Snow can summon ravens, there is no chance in hell your father can ambush him in the open field. The wolves beat him with his full army," Bronn said. "Yes, but perhaps that will delay them. Lady Sansa, you know your brothers. Are they likely to charge down immediately to King's Landing?" Tyrion asked. Sansa wiped any emotion from her face, wary of Lannister tricks. "My brothers are traitors. My father and mother are traitors. I am loyal to my beloved Joffrey," she said. "Lady Sansa, you do not need to hide. We know who you wish to win," Tyrion said gently. She refused to answer. They could beat her, but it would not be for something she said. She kept her hands over her knitting and hid the image of Lady. The great doors to the small hall swung open again. A plump, bald man, garbed in rich silk and velvet pentoshi robes, walked in. His soft, effeminate white hands smelled of lilac and lavender. Varys had no guards and no weapons, but the Master of Whispers knew things that no one should know. He frightened Sansa, but then so did many people in the Red Keep. "Ah, my Lord Hand. We have been summoned by the king for a meeting of the small council," Varys announced. "Was this your doing?" the dwarf asked. "Pardon?" The meeting was called by Joffrey. The eunuch replied, "This preacher in Cobbler's Square, did your little birds give him the news of the battle? You were supposed to know everything that goes on in Westeros," Tyrion said. "I knew the battle was being fought near the Trident, but when armies clash, my little birds do not think of sending messages and ravens. They merely want to live for another day," Varys said. "Many men and women sworn to the faith have died in the Riverlands. More come every day to the capital with stories of the war. They do not like your father." "No one likes my father. And you do not have spies in those men." "I am surprised, Varys. You have eyes everywhere in this city," Tyrion said. "I am no sorcerer able to command wolves and ravens, but I have something I can share." When Varys reached into his robe, Bronn put a hand on his dagger. The eunuch withdrew a sliver of parchment. "The raven came late this morning from a holdfast on the King's Road." "And what does it say?" Tyrion asked. "The Lannister army fled past the keep last night. Thousands of men running south." Varys read aloud. "The Lion in full and complete retreat." The meeting at the Red Keep was insipid even by Tyrion's low expectations. Joffrey had raged and screamed. Cersei wavered between comforting her son and ranting at the incompetence of others. When Tyrion pointed out that incompetence was pure Lannister and the blame should be placed on their Lord Father, Cersei and Pycelle both shut up. "Your Grace, my little birds have told me a story in the Reach. The usurper Renly has passed away from his injuries," the Aerys said. Tyrion snorted. The death coincided with Baelish's visit. Littlefinger had been busy. "I wish my uncle had not died," Joffrey said, and then sneered. "Because if he were alive, I would take his head and mount it on the Red Keep." Your Grace, we need to concentrate on the living. We need more swords if the Northern army marches to King's Landing. Lord Baelish has gone to the Reach. We will need to urge him to pursue the Tyrells further, Tyrion said. For once, you make sense. Promise them anything. I want the Northmen defeated. I want Robb Stark's head served at a feast. I want Jon Snow drawn and quartered, Joffrey said. There are other armies still out there. The Martells, I believe we should offer a betrothal with Myrcella to keep them as allies to the throne. Tyrion said, You are not selling my daughter to the Dornish. They hated us for years. The Martells might kill her, Cersei yelled. Will it get us swords? Joffrey demanded. It may prevent those swords from being sworn to other parties. If Stannis or Robb Stark ally with Dorne, we could be attacked from the south, Tyrion said. Send Myrcella to Dorne, Joffrey said. Cersei looked at her son in shock, but sweeling she might not be safe. I don't care, Mother. I don't care if Tommen or Myrcella die. They live to serve me. I am the king. What about Storm's End? Joffrey said. Your Grace, the castle is in Stannis Baratheon's hands. Ser Gilbert Faring holds it as castellan. Stannis' fleet has been preparing to depart. Will he attack King's Landing? The look of fear on Joffrey's face would be comical if Tyrion was not worried about the same. Stannis may, but he does not have the forces to take the city. We have several ways to defend the city. Wildfire and a great steel, Tyrion said. No one cares, Uncle. Joffrey had stopped listening. Anger built again on his face. What about these Stormlanders? Few have defected to Stannis. Most have returned to their keeps. Varys said, Why are they not serving me? Why are they not fighting for me? Joffrey demanded. Because they do not think you are a Baratheon, Tyrion thought. We are lucky that they see Stannis as a kinslayer. Sweetling, they are pledged to Storm's End. With the control of the castle in question, the liege lords must consider their oaths. Cersei explained. An enraged Joffrey slammed his hand on the table. They should serve the king. When the war is over, I will have their heads for treason. I should have my own forces and not depend on lords. I won't need Lannisters, Martells, or Tyrells. As Cersei tried to convince a petulant Joffrey that was not possible, Tyrion had a flash of happiness. He would have loved to see his nephew lead an army against Robb Stark and Jon Snow. Then Tyrion realized that when the battle ended, the Lannisters would all lose their heads. His head may not have been large or pretty, but he was quite attached to it. Rosia Stark crept in the afternoon shadows to Jon's tent. She was happy to see Robb and her mother, but a day later she was tired of being fussed over by Lady Catelyn, Lady Yadwood, and Lady Blackwood. She had been forced into a tub and doused with scalding water. Servants had scrubbed her skin until she was bright red and then dumped in some stinky flowers. Nymeria had taken one look at the tub and then ran away to ghost. The white dire wolf guarded Jon's tent between the prisoners and the wounded. The pack of gray wolves stayed close, and ravens quirked at all hours. Jon had 36 boys distributing supplies, guarding the catapults and ballista, feeding the wounded and changing dressings and running errands. Some were only a name day older than she was, but they ordered prisoners to carry supplies, dig graves, and break down the wall to be sawed into long shafts. Arya had asked why prisoners, many not even in chains, would follow the orders of young boys. Hallis Mullen answered, They are afraid of the White Wolf, the stories of what he has done at the Tooth. Beg pardon, but it is not for a lady's ears. When supper was served, she was washed, and combed and dressed. They had no gowns, so they gave her brown stockings, a tunic, and an oversized doublet. Her mother sewed a kirtle in Tully colors, mud, red, and blue. She sat at a high table, near her brother Robb. But when Robb was diverted, lords and ladies would gossip and tell tales. They talked about the battle at the Red River, and how Jon Snow silenced the ballistas until knights charged into a field of death. They whispered about wolves and ravens, and how ghosts' red eyes were like the bleeding face of a weirwood tree. They boasted that the North could not be defeated, the young wolf's leadership, the White Wolf's sorcery. They loved her brother Robb. They feared her brother Jon. Jon was not at dinner. There were hundreds of badly injured soldiers, and he spent many hours tending to the wounded. He also worked often with the artillery. The highborn and smallborn alike marveled at the killing power of the machines. Robb was busy as well, speaking to lords, listening to complaints, and sparring with his trusted battle guard. Rob could often be found in his battle tent, grey wind at his feet, riding ravens to castles in the Riverlands and the north. She was seen just as their little sister, Arua, underfoot. The men paid their courtesies, and Winterfell and Tully guards kept a constant eye on her. Her mother insisted she sleep in the same tent, but Nymeria wanted to stay out in the open, near Ghost. She hugged the dire wolf before bed, but it wasn't the same. She was pampered, coddled, and loved, but that wasn't her. She would never be a proper lady. She snuck away from Hallis Mullen and Yallabelly. Through the tent flap, Ghost sniffed her first, and then Nymeria. The ravens glanced at her with beady eyes before turning away. A tall blonde boy, perhaps 10 and 4, was leaving the tent, carrying a scroll. Arya walked in and hugged Nymeria. "I missed you." The dire wolf rubbed her gray fur against her cheek, and Jon smiled. "She is going to get your dress dirty," Jon said. "Good," Arya said, looking at the bundles of paper in front of her brother. "What are you doing?" "Preparing. Once we take back the fortifications on the Red Fork, there is no reason to stay. The prisoners should be moved to castles or ransomed. I may keep a few boys here to tend the injured, but the army should camp elsewhere, and the seriously wounded should be moved to Harroway or Stonehenge. We will go south and east," Jon said. "Are you going to leave me?" Arya demanded. Jon arched his eyebrows. "Arya, Rob and I just found you, and Nymeria too." Rhaenyra bit her lip. "I overheard stories from the servants that you are a ward and a sorcerer. They whispered dark things about you." Yada offered her a chair. "Rhaenyra, I am a warg. I can see from the eyes of a wolf or a raven. We could not have crossed the Golden Tooth otherwise. And at the Red Fork, if I didn't warg into the wolves and the ravens, the Lannisters would have won." "What was that like?" "They say you summoned a cloud of ravens so vast, the sky darkened." Arya asked with wonder. "Strange and frightening. I could see from 1,000 eyes, the ravens and wolves. I felt powerful but mad, like I would lose my mind. Magic is a double-edged sword. There is no safety when you grasp it," Jon said. A somber Arya looked down. "I think I am a ward too. I have wolf dreams. I saw Nymeria attacking 4 men who were tracking me. She killed them with her pack. I am not ashamed to be a warg. It is a part of me, and it is a part of you. It does not change who you are. To be bonded with a dire wolf is a wonderful thing. A gift from the gods. Nymeria saved me at the Red Fork, and Ghost has helped me many times." "He deserves to be honored more than me," Jon said. The White Wolf cocked his head and rubbed Jon's leg. Rhaenyra held Nymeria, her skinny arms around the she-wolf's strong neck. She looked up to her brother. "I want to stay with you and Rob, with Ghost, Greywind, and Nymeria. I don't want to be locked up in a castle or paraded around as a lady. I want to help you fight." "Arya, war is dangerous," Jon said. "So is peace. They killed Saints' dire wolf, and for what? Because Joffrey attacked my friend Micah and tried to hurt me," Arya said. "Joffrey truly is a shit," Jon said. "I could stay with you, Jon. I could be your squire," Arya said eagerly. Jon laughed. "I am not a knight, Arya." "Rob isn't a knight, either, and he has a squire," she said. "I would be a great squire. It is much better than being married off like a prize." Jon smiled. "You know, the Freys wanted a betrothal to cross their bridge. They asked for Rob's hand and yours in marriage." Orgier turned white and then got angry. "Which Frey was it?" "Aelmar, I think. The squire who picks his nose." Jon burst out laughing at her sour reaction. "How can you laugh?" Arya fumed. "Yarsir, if we do not laugh, we could only cry." "I will not let anyone undeserving marry you. And besides, if you married Aelmar Frey, Nymeria would probably eat him," Jon said. They were still laughing when Chet came into the tent. "Maester Snow, Lord Stark has called for you for a war council." "Thank you, Chet. My sister and I will attend." Jon ignored the strange looks when they walked into the tent. The mood was grave, and the Northern Lords had lost all sense of joy. The Great Jon paced back and forth, like a giant ready to roar. It had been only 2 days after their victory at the Red Fork. "Sweetling, what are you doing here?" Lady Stark asked of her daughter. "Jon said I should attend," Arya responded. "But you are too young, Lady Arya. These are matters of war," Robert Glover said. "Orgier is a Stark, and the Starks have always served their house in wars." Jon said, She has only 11 name days, Catelyn said with anger. It will be my 12th name day soon, Arya said stubbornly. Jon raised his hand. My lords, you have accepted that I am Rob's heir. The northern lords nodded, some reluctantly. Arya is my heir. If I fall, I return my title to House Stark. Rob had a faint smile on his face. Well played, Jon. Brain should be the heir, after Rob. Catelyn grumbled. In a time of peace, he would be. This is war. Arya is a year older, and Jon chose her. You are welcome to join us, sister. Rob offered the seats next to him. Several ravens arrived today with dark news. Ironborn ships have been seen in the north. 30 long ships were sighted at Deepwood Mott's, 8 more at the Stony Shore. But the worst news comes from Flint's Finger. They have seen 100 ships in Blazewater Bay. Lord Stark, that must be the Iron Fleet, captained by Victorian Greyjoy. He is a powerful warrior, but only follows Ep8's orders. Stupid and stubborn as an ox, that one. Lord Lannister said. Rob, we must send more men to defend Winterfell, Catelyn said. Men from White Harbor arrived at Winterfell a week ago, and with the levies, Sir Roderick will command 2,000, but Victorian will have 5 to 10,000 men, Rob said. How do we know he will attack Winterfell? His ships are hundreds of miles away. Arya said. Rosier is right. Victorian would have to abandon his ships and trek a long distance over land, although they could sail up the rivers to get closer, Jon said. Men from Torrance Square reports that they have seen Theon Greyjoy at the Stony Shore. They ask whether they should venture west to attack him. Rosier. That's very odd, Jon said, thinking deeply. The Northmen waited for him to continue. Theon has lived in Winterfell for a decade. If the Greyjoys wanted to attack Winterfell, Theon would be with the main fleet. Even if Victorian was commander, he would want Theon's knowledge. But if the Iron Fleet is not attacking Winterfell, why are they there? Arya said. Jon and Rob both studied the map. Blazewater Bay was a large but narrow bay of the Sunset Sea. Ships from Torrance Square and Barrowtown could travel south into the Salt Spear. But the Salt Spear also extended even further east, hundreds of miles. There it hit the Fever River, part of the neck that separated the north from the Seven Kingdoms. And at the end of the Fever River, only 20 miles inland, the ancient stronghold of the First Men stood, Moat Cailin. Of course, Jon said. Both brothers had realized at the same time, the Iron Fleet is doing what I suggested to Sir Stepheron. They wish to sail their ships east on the Salt Spear, and the Fever River. They want to take Moat Cailin from the west, Jon said. But if they do so, Lord Snow, we will be trapped south of the neck, Harrion said. Moat Cailin commanded the only road through the neck. Any army moving north would lose a huge number to bogs, quicksand, and swamps. Rampant disease would break out among the soldiers. We will need to send a raven to Moat Cailin. Jon has sent 500 more archers and spearmen, so they will have 600 men. But it will be harder to hold off an army from the west or north than the south. Roach said. There is a weakness to the Greyjoy plan. The eyes in the room turned to Jon. The Fever River narrows a great deal. At some points, only 1 or 2 ships can pass. The Iron Fleet will be vulnerable. But the Iron Fleet has thousands of men, Lord Karstark said. We would not attack the men. We attack the ships. If we could sink 1 ship, we could block the river. North of the river, there are barrows, hills that Northmen could use to hide and attack. South of the river, there are swamps. It is called the Fever River for a reason. If Victorian Greyjoy gets stuck on the Fever River, his men will die of sickness and starvation, Jon said. Rob nodded. Go find me the leader of the Dustins. The Great Jon brought Sar Rogar, Dustin, into the room. He was a second cousin of the late Lord, and also related to the Racewells. He led the small cohort of men from Barrowtown. Sar Rogar, are you loyal to the north? Will Barrowtown keep their faith with the Starks? The knight might have taken offense, but the many hard and angry faces in the tent stopped him. My lord, I do not understand. It is true Lady Barbary has grievances, but House Dustin has fought for the Starks in the last 3 wars, Rosier said. The Greyjoys mean to attack Moat Cailin from the west on the Fever River. I want Barrowtown to call levies and harass the squids as they go through the swamp. No direct engagements or assaults, but hit and run only, particularly to damage the ships. I want their forces slowed down. You will write to Lady Barbary. If she should delay or pretend not to receive my raven when the war ends, I will send Jon Snow to sack Barrowtown, tear down Barrow Hall, and end the Dustin line, Robb said. And I will help him. Great John Umber said, any Northman who allows squids to attack should be buried in the neck or drowned at sea. The North will remember if you are traitors. The Umbers are with you, Lord Stark. The Flints, Manderleys, and Karstarks also agreed. My lord, I will write the raven. I am certain Lady Barbary will heed the call. I will speak to the Rightswell men as well. A red-faced Roger said, and quickly left. Tallheart's men at the Twins must go north to the moat, and I will send Cranagman to find Lord Reed, and tell him to attack from the south. They can raft up the Green Fork. Robb said, White Harbor can send men too, Lord Stark, but it will take weeks. There is no road that connects White Harbor to the King's Road, Weidel said. What of Deepwood Motti, my lord? The castle is well provisioned and has hundreds of Glover men, but the villagers will suffer, Rosier Glover said. There is little we can do. The Mormonts have sent most of their forces south. Lady Glover will have to withstand the siege. Robb said, and Manderley men must stay at Winterfell. I want my brothers safe. I promise you that the Ironborn will pay dearly for the attack. Robb, we should send a messenger to King's Landing. We can get Sansa back and end the war. Then we can return north and repel the Greyjoys, Catelyn said. Joffrey the Illborn still sits on the throne, but I would prefer not to fight on two fronts. We will treat with the Lannisters, but only from strength. We will clear the rest of the Riverlands. Eadard, Dacey, and the Small John have already started. In a few weeks, I want any bandits and Lannisters gone. We will need to take Harrenhal and control the King's Road. We will send more men to clear Derry and Maidenpool and south, Robb said. Our forces will be stretched thin, and rivermen may be slow to return when they see their burnt-down farms and destroyed villages, the Blackfish warned. We are stretched too thin already. That cannot be helped. Maidenport and Derry should be free, and Harrenhal must be taken. If Tywin Lannister returns north, then we need that castle as a base for supplies, Robb said. Robb dismissed the lords and his lady mother. He kept back only his siblings, Jon and Arya, and their direwolves. So you are now Jon's heir. When did this happen? Robb asked. I never asked for it. Arya protested. It was a surprise to me. Now you know how I felt when Robb declared me his heir. Jon said, true enough. Jon was rather annoyed at being proclaimed heir to the north. He still wants to return to the Citadel, Robb said. He poured goblets of water for his brother and sister. What do you think about Moat Cailin? It will be a close thing. It depends a great deal on whether the Ironborn can be taken by surprise, and on whether Lord Reed and Lady Dustin send enough men, Jon said. But even if you lose Moat Cailin, hope is not lost. You could sail men from Maidenpool to White Harbor. It would take a month, but you can take Moat Cailin from the north. If I had 3,000 men, I could destroy the Greyjoys on the Fever River. I cannot spare you to go north, brother. The Iron Throne is the true threat, and we do not have enough men. Ro said, I am sending Sir Robert Royce to the Vale. Sir Zerlovia is a good man, but a knight can serve who he wishes. A lord cannot, Jon said. What are the two of you talking about? Arya asked. Robert is Jon Royce's second son. Robert wants men from the Vale, but your aunt has refused. They may be old friends of father, but I am not certain. Lord Royce or Redfort will disobey Lady Arryn. We have lost 2,000 in battle. We had to send another 1,500 north, 1,000 more guard the tooth. And Lord Bolton means to betray us. Jon said. The Boltons? But how and what will you do? Arya said. Roose Bolton will pay. His bastard betrayed us at the Red Fork. Jon said, we have many enemies. Jon has removed the lands to the west from the war, but we still have Ironborn to the north, King's Landing and the Lannisters, Bolton's treachery, and who knows what Stannis Baratheon will do, Rube said. Arya, are you certain you want to stay on the battlefield? We could send you somewhere safe. You are not going to marry me off, Arya cried. Robb shot a dirty look at Jon, who shrugged and smiled. Robb sighed and looked at his angry sister. I swear, little sister, that I will not marry you off without your consent. One awful betrothal in this family is enough, he said. I am going to be Jon's squire, Arya said, and Nymeria perked up her ears. Rob groaned. You explain this to Lady Stark, he said to Jon, who rolled his eyes. Ghost and Grey Wind shook their heads, but Nymeria only snickered while Arya beamed. Jon could not complain about the turn of events. He would make certain that his sister stayed safe. Now they only needed Sansa, and the Starks could return to Winterfell and the rest of the pack. Tedder Baelish smiled as he walked through the hall, fingering the small crystal that had hung on the false septon's neck. Lothar Brune had washed the blood off after disposing of the mummers. Negotiations were going well. He had promised 2 positions on the King's Guard to the Reach, the meaningless Master of Law's spot on the Small Council, the return of Hobber and Horse Tyrell, and a tax holiday of 2 years for Highgarden. He had been forced to give Sansa Stark up to the Queen of Thorns, but that promise could be broken. Joffrey Baratheon hated losing his toys. The Tyrells still wanted more, but that would come at the cost of Lannister power. The only question was when those 2 houses would go to war. As Baelish entered the room, the blade of a longsword sliced down, stopping an inch from his neck. Half the 7 kingdoms might think Loras Tyrell exceptionally handsome. But Littlefinger weighed the value of good looks only in whores, not in men who might kill him. Do you mean to cousin us? Lorsier shouted. A pompous mace nodded behind him. My lords, what is the meaning of this? I have come in good faith. If I have offended you, tell me why. Baelish said with feigned outrage. Loras, bring him to me, the Queen of Thrones commanded, surrounded by her grandchildren. We received news from the Riverlands this morning. Did you know? I left King's Landing before any battle. How could I have received any news? Baelish said. I am in the dark, my lords. Tywin Lannister lost at the Red Fork. He fled south like a dog. They say the best knights of the Westerlands died at the river, slain by traps and spells by the bloody wolf, Willa said. The slaughter was so great that ravens and wolves swarmed the field, devouring men alive. The Lannisters had the larger army, and yet the wolves beat them bloody. Would you have us join the losing side? Garlane said. But Baelish smiled. But that is wonderful news, my lords, and even better for the Reach and Highgarden. You will be a great queen, your grace. Littlefinger bowed to Marguerite Tyrell. What trickery is this? A confused Mace asked. With Tywin Lannister defeated, the Iron Throne will need your swords even more. You will have greater influence. Mates Tyrell, the hand of the king. Willis Tyrell, Master of Laws. Perhaps you would be the Master of Ships, Sir Garland. And Lady Marguerite, good Queen Alysanne, had her own sworn shield. You might ask for an entire Queen's Guard, Baelish said. I don't like the sea, Baelish, and the wolves are still on the field, Garland said. A shocked Mace Tyrell had found his voice. Hand of the King. Do you really think Tywin will let me be Hand? I would be the first Tyrell, even greater than Leo Longthorn. He may have been the greatest knight in the 7 kingdoms, but he was not Hand. Of course, my lord, you would be the first of your name to be Hand, and as Hand, you would have 2 Reachmen on the council, and my vote is Master of Coin. Joffrey may be Baratheon and Lannister, but behind the throne, it would be all Tyrells. Baelish said. Before Mace could puff up further, Olena Tyrell's voice rang out. Lord Baelish, I would have a word alone. Tatyr retired with the Queen of Thorns to the Solar. Her 2 giant guards loomed over him, and the door was guarded by Highgarden men led by Ser Garland. Olena took out a small glass vial that held a thick purple liquid smelling of ash and lime. A slender dagger rested on the table. Do you know what that is? She pointed at the glass. I confess that I am no maester, Baelish said. It is the Strangler. You used this to kill Renly. Archmaester Exbros told me in private. The Strangler is usually dissolved in wine, but he assures me that a dagger would also work. Lady Olena, I was nowhere near the castle. Baelish protested. The Queen of Thorns motioned her 2 guards forward. All right. Yes, I did use the Strangler, but Rowley was of no use to anyone. With him alive but unconscious, nothing would change. The Tyrells would be stuck in the Reach. The wolves and lions would be fighting in the Riverlands. I have helped you greatly. Don't pretend that you care about helping the Tyrells. I could tell Lors that you killed Renly. He would be happy to chop off your head. Olena said. Why haven't you then? Bosie asked. There are things to be bargained for, and I am curious. Why did you do this? Why murder Renly? What is your interest in the matter? Olena asked. The Lannisters will reward me. They may grant me a great castle, Baelish said. Please, you have never cared about lands or knights. Your trade is gold, whores, and secrets. Why do you want the Tyrells to ally with the Lannisters? Even if Stannis gained the Iron Throne, he could not ban your brothels, Olena said. I will tell you, but only in private. Baelish looked at the two giant guards. Olena nodded and Rake and Eric stepped back. I have long hated House Stark. When I was a boy, I was fostered at River Run and grew up with Catelyn Tully. She loved me and I loved her, but her father promised her to Brandon Stark. I challenged him for her hand and the oath of Winterfell nearly killed me. I have heard a different story. Brandon Stark offered you multiple chances to yield. Lady Catelyn begged for your life. Everyone knew that you had no chance against Brandon. Even in the Reach, we heard that he was a gifted swordsman. Olena said, and yet he is dead, and I am alive, and Ned Stark is dead. I want all the Starks and the Tullys beaten, except for my lost love, Baelish said. Catelyn Tully was married 17 years ago, and yet you still thirst for revenge against her sons and daughters? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Very well, but I want something as well. Otherwise, House Tyrell refuses the alliance. Olena said, I will grant you everything in my power. I swear it, Baelish said. Olena held up her hand and Eric left the room. She pointed to the Strangler. I want Joffrey Baratheon dead. Tommen will be a better king for my granddaughter and the Tyrells. Of course, my lady, he nodded pensively to Olena Tyrell. Deep down, Baelish beamed. 10 years ago, he had started his rise as the customs agent for Jon Arryn at Gulltown. Now the final seeds had been sown. It was the slow knife, the knife that takes its time, the knife that waits years without forgetting, then slips quietly between the bones. That's the knife that cuts deepest. House Stark would be destroyed. Owen Fossaway slipped into the room, full of great lords and powerful landed knights. He hid behind the stout Mathis Rowan and saw the Tyrells enter. Petter Baelish was not with them, and the room was sealed shut, with rows of guards outside. No servants were allowed. Only the greatest of the highborn in the Reach. Mace Tarl beamed at the assembled lords. My daughter will become queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Lady Marjorie is betrothed to King Joffrey, and the Iron Throne has promised many rewards to the Reach for our loyalty. But the Lannisters are losing. An unknown voice shouted in the room. Mathis Rowan spoke. We have all heard about Lord Tywin's defeat. They say even now, a Sen night later, the Trident is full of bodies and bleeds red from the blood of dead men. Owen wondered if Lord Rowan knew that the Red Fork had always been red from mud. Our forces outnumber the Northmen, and we are better armed, Mace said dismissively. That was true for Tywin Lannister's men, and they were slaughtered, Jon Fossaway said. Rangiel Torley snorted. No kingdom is stronger than the Reach. We have more knights, soldiers, and cavalry than any. The wolves will bend the knee when they see our might. Sayer Baelor stood up. The handsome knight was respected throughout the Reach. I would not be so certain. The Hightower has not been involved with the Iron Throne since the dance. In that war, House Hightower supported the Greens and Aegon II. Cregan Stark sent the Winter Wolves south under Roderick Dustin to fight for the Blacks. In their first battle, the Wolves charged Lannister spearmen and forced them into the God's Eye, where many drowned. In the second battle, they slaughtered Ser Criston Cole, the Hand of the King, and in their final battle, the Northmen charged 10 times their number and killed Lord Hightower. But the Winter Wolves never returned north. They were all slain in the Riverlands, Tarsley said. Not before they killed many, many men. Roderick Dustin was covered in blood from head to heel, and his shield arm was chopped off when he slew Lord Armand Hightower with his sword. I doubt these Northmen will be affrighted by any host. Baelor said, Sir Baelor, we appreciate your thoughts, but we are aware of something that you are not, Lady Olena said. Sir Garland stepped forth. We have reports that Victarion Greyjoy has left Pike with the Iron Fleet. He goes north to raid. So House Stark is under attack from the Squids. Massus Rowan asked. Matt Tyrell rubbed fat, meaty hands in glee. To save his lands, Robb Stark will have to return home. It's plain the boy must gather his forces, abandon the Riverlands, and throw his might north to repel the Greyjoys. That is what I would do. There was a collective sigh as the lords realized that the Reach would win the Iron Throne without much bloodshed. Only the pugnacious Randyll Tarly had been eager for battle. The men of the Reach preferred jousts and tournaments over fighting savages and wolves, and the less said about sorcery, weirwood trees, and wargs, the better. The lords congratulated the new queen and pledged their fealty. After all, with 50,000 fresh soldiers, a Lannister alliance, and the military mind of Randyll Tarly, what could possibly go wrong? Owen Fossaway left the room quickly. He needed to send a raven to Jon Snow. Arya Stark had grown up in the shadow of her sister, Sansa, a misfit and a lone wolf. She detested three things. She did not like being the center of attention, and many eyes stared at her that afternoon. She did not like being fussed over, and Lady Smallwood, Lady Blackwood, and Lady Wynn cooed over her like a little bird. And she truly hated trying on clothes. "Stay still, Arya," Jon said for the third time. "Do I really need this?" she said. "Yes," her brothers replied, as three curious dire wolves looked on. The Wintertown boys handed the thin metal discs to Jon, and he attached them to the plates already sewn into the red and gold silk doublet. In a looted wagon, Chet discovered the doublet along with a crimson silk blanket decorated with the Lion of the Lannisters. Jon had ripped up the blanket for thread and an inner layer. "There. How does that feel?" Jon stepped back. Needle rested on the table next to her lady mother. Arya slipped into the first few movements of the water dance, her body side-face, legs bent, balanced on the tips of her toes, lunging first with the left and then the right. She stutter-stepped, extending her left hand forward from the diagonal position in a thrust, and glided with speed and grace. Catelyn groaned at the sight of Arya dancing lightly, like a water droplet across the surface of the trident. "I can barely feel the armor. It is so light." Yadu was Ed. She had once worn her father's brigandine, boiled leather riveted with iron plates. That was 2 name days ago, but she could barely move, and she knew that a chainmail hauberk could weigh north of 20 pounds, and plate armor was even more cumbersome. The steel discs and plates made no sound as she danced, but it is strong enough to protect her. Rob pointed to the doublet over her arms and torso. "Yes. With the blast furnace, I experimented with different alloys. This one is lighter and cannot hold an edge, but it has high impact strength and force resistance. A crossbow at 50 feet could not penetrate the armor. The brigandine is strong enough to block an arrow, a dagger thrust, or a sword, and the weight is well distributed. The doublet only weighs 7 pounds. "Why does she get the best gifts?" Rob complained. Arya smiled at the jest. "That brigandine is difficult to make. We don't have much of that metal, and even less silk. The silk is strong and light. The discs have to be beaten thin and fitted to the wearer," Jon said. "The only problem, Arya, is that you look like a Lannister in crimson and gold. You need more gray and black," Rob said. "I think Nymeria's presence is enough," Jon said. The dark gray she-wolf nodded haughtily. "You look lovely, child. I just wish you did not need armor." Lady Smallwood said, "I need it for battle. Can I go to the sparring yard?" After Jon nodded, she picked up Needle and dashed out of the tent. Nymeria followed her, and the ladies departed with Catelyn Stark in the other direction. Arya was too far to hear her brothers speak about battle plans. That night, Arya sat inside her brother Jon's tent. She had spent most of the day sparring with Brienne, dancing around the tall woman. Needle could not penetrate the heavy blue steel plate, so even exhausted, the maid of Tarth won. A large raven entered and lit on Jon's shoulder. Her brother spoke to Chet, who rushed out. "Rosiayu, prepare the horses. We have to go," Jon said. She joined dozens of squires outside. Little Ben Blackwood helped Carol Vance don armor. Oliver Frey brought out horses for Rob and many in his battle guard. The Blackfish was already mounted and urged Edmure Tully to hurry. Rob held up his hand to the dozen riverlords and even more Northmen. Silence on the ride. She galloped at Jon's side, and the 3 direwolves racing in the dark with Grey Wind at the lead. They took the river road west, 50 men strong and heavily armed. Torches blazed at the inn at the Crossroads, and smoke puffed from the white stone chimney. Arya reached hesitantly for Nymeria, and she could smell from a mile away the scent of unwashed men and tired horses. They surrounded the building on all sides, ignoring the laughter inside. Northmen and rivermen guarded every window and exit, weapons ready. When the Greyjon pushed the door open, there were children at the inn at the Crossroads, but also a dozen men, a motley mixture, some brawny soldiers, a few lean archers, and some so young they could be squires. An older man, with a thin fox-like face, stopped singing "Let Me Drink Your Beauty" on his wood harp. The eyes of the band went to a hooded man speaking with Gendry. He turned and Arya could see his ghastly face. One of his eyes was gone, the flesh about the socket scarred and puckered, and the other side of the face had been bashed in. He wore a ragged black cloak speckled with stars and a dented iron breastplate, bearing a forked purple lightning bolt. A skinny red-headed man reached for his bow. "Touch any weapon and you will lose both of your hands." "Surrender your arms," Jon said. The one-eyed man stood up and handed over a shield slashed by lightning and a dark longsword. He might have been dashing once, but now he looked like a scarecrow, soaked after a flood. "The young wolf and the white wolf. My men have done nothing wrong," he said. "I will be the judge of that," Beric Dondarrion, Rob said. Arazier stood guard with Olivar Frey and a few other squires. She doubted that was necessary. 10 prisoners, even Harwin, who had once served as a Stark guard, were bound tightly in ropes. Nymeria, alone, could have killed them all. Only Beric Dondarrion and a thin man in red robes with a top knot of gray hair and a droopy face remained at liberty. "How did you find us, Aerie?" Hot Pie asked. "This bunch only came at sunset." "Jon knew," Arya said. Hot Pie gawked at her brother, his mouth agape. "Don't stare. You might attract his attention," Gendry said. Hot Pie gulped and scurried back to the kitchen. The other squires also turned their eyes away in fear. Rosiera walked over to her brother. Jon was in a corner with the 2 sisters who stared down at the table. Paiti rushed to get Aura a mug of water. When she sat, Jane Hiddle was on the verge of tears. But Willow tried to keep her wit. "I asked them when they expect the Septon again." Jon said to Arya, "He usually comes twice a moon, but he came every Sunnite before the Battle of the 3 Wolves," Willows said. Jon explained his thinking to Arya. "The Septon is a spy for Dondarrion. How else could children hold an inn for 4 moons? And how could any unarmed man deliver food on a donkey when Lannister men are around? When you came to the inn, only Willow was here, but her older sister returned a few days later. Why would an innkeep travel? He came twice when I was here. Septon Maribald. I should have known something was strange," Arya said. Jon shrugged. "You were tired and hungry." "My lord, what will happen to us now?" Willow asked, trying not to cry. "We need to see what Dondarrion says." "Come, Arya." They left the 2 frightened Heddles, clutching each other for comfort. "And what should be done with your merry band?" Rob said. "Lord Stark, they are a bunch of bandits and deserters." Steveron Frey snorted. "We are brothers here, sworn to the realm," the red-robed man said. "Ah," the singer chimed in. "The Brotherhood without banners, the Knights of the Hollow Hill." The man that had once been Beric Dondarrion smiled sadly. "My lord, we are kingsmen still. Your father, Ned Stark, and Hand of the King, charged us with bringing justice to the mountain. 60 men led by a fool in a starry cloak were ambushed at Mummer's Ford. But we still fight to protect the Riverlands for Robert Baratheon. Robert is not the king. He has been dead a year," Rob said. "But we still serve his cause. Justice for the realm." The Scarecrow said. "You are brigands and broken men. Who have you fought?" Brynden Tully said. "We bled the goat and the dog. We bloodied them near Harrenhal," the archer yelled. "Not very many. Clegane had 1,000 men at the Red Fork," the Blackfish replied. "Where are the rest of your men, Lord Beric, and how many are they?" Jon asked. Before the Lightning Lord could answer, the thin man in red gasped. "I have seen your face, my lord. I have seen you before. They say I resemble my father, Lord Stark." Jon replied, "No, I have seen you in the fires, in Rosier's visions. All the eyes in the inn, from the Heddles to the Riverlords, to the orphans, to the Northmen, were on the ardent Red Priest. I saw you in a great battle, surrounded by the dead and the dying. You are Azor Ahai reborn, and death itself will bend the knee before you." Farosamir knelt down and Beric Dondarrion followed. Arya looked at the annoyed face of her brother Jon. He did not seem pleased by the men at his feet. The Starks huddled together out of the prying eyes of the entire inn. The Blackfish and Edmure attended, and the Great Jon, by dint of size and bulk, was the only Northman who managed to squeeze into the small room. After the declaration that Jon was Aziratai reborn, the Red Priest had babbled on about the legend of the Lightbringer and dragons, although Arya did not know whether that was a man or the sword. Anyone who killed his wife to make a sword was a fool. Her brother would never do such a thing. "What do you make of all this?" Rob asked. "Perhaps it is all a mummer's farce to save his neck," the Blackfish said. Edmure Tully nodded. "I have never heard of this before today. I have read of Azor-Ahai, of course, in Voltaire's Jade Compendium. It is similar to the legend of the prince who was promised, and the last hero of the first men. They defeated the others 8,000 years past. But who is to say what happened so long ago?" Jon said. "One legend I might believe, but the Red Priest says 3. "Could you be the subject of 3 prophecies, Jon?" Rob said, half jesting but half in wonder. "Thoris says that I am the prince who is promised, born amidst salt and smoke under a bleeding star. I don't even know my mother's name. Next he claims that I will deliver the world from darkness and bring a summer that never ends. And last he swears that the Lord of Light has sent visions of dragons, and that the dragon must have 3 heads. Jon said. "Why would a dragon need 3 heads?" Edmure asked. "The Conquest had 3 dragons. Aegon and his 2 wives were all dragon riders." Arya said, "Arya, I don't think Jon has been hiding a dragon. If he had one, he would have sent it against the Lannister knights when they charged." Road said, "The Red Priestess at the Stormlands? What did she say about Stannis?" Jon asked. "Melisandre said that Stannis was the Lord of Light's chosen, born amidst salt and smoke. And Renly said that Stannis had a flaming sword," Road said. "This does not matter. Dreams may have power, but prophecies are not to be trusted. Perhaps Thoros sees a vision while another red woman sees another. Who can say what is right? Whether I am Azor-Ahai or not, we must defeat our enemies in battle," Jon said. "Maester Snow is right. We need swords, not dreams," the Blackfish said. They walked outside into the common room, and the chatter immediately died. Her 2 brothers spoke briefly, and then the Lord of Winterfell stepped forth. "Lord Beric, these are the terms I will give you. Your men have 3 choices. They can disperse and go back to their homes. They can swear an oath to a lord, and those vows must be honored. Or they can hang. There will be no more banditry in the Riverlands," Rob said. "What about the mountains, men?" A big man in a yellow cloak cried. "I butchered most of them across the Red Fork. I hung the rest 2 days ago," Jon said. Beric Dondarrion stood up from his chair. "I accept your terms, Lord Stark." He turned to Jon Snow. "Lord Snow, I pledge my sword and service to you." Thoris and the other 10, even tied in ropes, attempted the same. Her brother Jon groaned. The knock came as Tyrion read the message from Petyr Baelish. Littlefinger had succeeded, but at the high price, the hand of the king. 2 small council seats, 2 members of the King's Guard, the commander of the City Watch, and Sansa Stark. In return, the Tyrells would send 40,000 men north with Lady Margaery and Mace Tyrell. Just as importantly, they would open the Rose Road again to wagons of food. The fear of the Northmen remained, but at least the famine would end. "Podrick, I am not to be disturbed," Tyrion called. The door opened, and a tall man with long copper hair walked through. He wore a plain gray cloak and black mail, and not the burnished bronze armor of House Marbrand. Sida Adam was the heir to Ashmark, and one of the best knights in Lannister's service. He was a good leader, an excellent horseman and swordsman, a childhood friend of Jaime, and one of the few nobles who had always treated him with courtesy, Tyrion. "Sir Adam, I am glad that you are alive and free," Tyrion said. "It was not easy. The Bloody Wolf is well named. Your father is here," Adam said. Tyrion took the dozen letters off the desk and walked to the small hall. Tywin Lannister sat in the small hall. His pale green eyes, flecked with gold, still glared proudly. But garbed in Aendark robes and accompanied by only one man, the great Lion of the Rock had lost his claws. Still, Podrick quivered with fear, and Tyrion's guardsmen stood at attention. The squire rushed to pour a bottle of Arbor Gold, only to be stopped by a hard stare. "Father, I am pleased to see you alive. The black looks good, like you have joined the Night's Watch and mean to travel beyond the wall," Tyrion said. "Enough of your japes," Tywin pointed at the letters. "Give me the news." And he did. He waited quietly while Tywin digested the details. His father did not like to be disturbed when thinking. Who accompanied Myrcella to Dorne? Sirius, Oakheart, and Sir Balin Swan, even the Dornish will respect a princess escorted by 2 members of the Kingsguard, Tyrion said. How did Balin Swan get a white cloak? Tywin said. There was a riot in King's Landing. The small folk threw shit at the Joffrey's chariot. He ordered Sandor Clegane and the other guards to kill the offender. In the chaos, the High Septon and Sir Preston Greenfield were hacked to death. Sir Jaxlin Bywater cleared the streets with a wedge of mounted lancers. He may have saved Tyrex's life, Tyrion said. See to it that he is rewarded, Tywin said. Already done. I gave him a small keep near Blackwater Rush, Tyrion said. His father nodded. Another knock in an odd 3-beat pattern rang on the door. Sir Diad walked through with his sister, dressed in rich raiment, gold lions on crimson silk. Cersei could not be bothered with cloaks or disguises. The spider would know before nightfall who she met in the tower, if he did not already. Sir Diad joined them at the table. Father, I will have rooms prepared for you in the Red Keep. Cersei said. No, I must return to our men. We need to rally the remaining troops and make certain they do not desert. They cannot hear that I fled to King's Landing, Tywin said brusquely. But you did flee to King's Landing, Tyrion thought. His father had always cast a great shadow, the destroyer of House Rayne and Tarbeck. Tywin Lannister was a lion among lions, who could impose his iron will on his bannermen and even the great houses of Westeros. But he had failed at the Red Fork, defeated by 2 Stark boys. The shadow had faded. How many men are left in the army? Cersei asked. We are camped at Rosie. We lost the supply train and need to replenish. We have 9,000 men still, but many are injured and some will die. Thousands more are missing. You do not know if they are dead, prisoners, or deserters. Ser Adam said, but what if the wolves come south on the King's Road? Joffrey will command the army return to King's Landing to defend the throne. Cersei said. Tywin scoffed. Command me? I am saving Joffrey's throne. Undeserved. That may be. We have friends hidden among the Starks. Men from the twins have gone north. Men from White Harbor have gone to Winterfell. Tyrion realized the implications in a flash. The Greyjoys have attacked the north. Beyond Greyjoy escaped to the Iron Islands. The north has few defenses and no ports on the western side. Robb Stark will need to deal with the raiders, Tywin said. If his forces are split, then we can attack with the Tyrell forces. We can crush the Starks and the Rivermen. Cersei said. Tywin looked at his daughter with a coolness bordering on frost. No, we will treat with the Starks. We will make peace, bitter though that may be. But father, Cersei said, have you forgotten your lessons? What is the most important source of power? Tywin said. Tyrion waited for a bit before answering. Armies. A brief flash of approval passed over his father's face before disappearing into a mask. Power comes from swords and spears, and men who are willing to fight and die. The North has those men, and they are well led. We have 9,000 men. Jon Snow has cut off reinforcements and supplies from the West. If we settle with the Starks, we can raise a new army. But by then, the Starks will return north, and Snow has forced captured prisoners to swear they will not attack the North or the Riverlands, Tyrion said. Vows can be broken, but more important is the number of men. How many swords do the Tyrells have? 50,000. We have 9,000. Mace Tyrell may be adult, but with 5 times our number, the Roses will control the city. We cannot afford to lose more men fighting against the Starks. We must raise more men and horses. If the tooth was free, men from Sarsfield, Case, and Feastfires could march west on the Gold Road, Tyrell said. I have sent banners in the name of the king to Stokeworth, Middleton, Hayford, Dunfort, and Duskendale, Tyrion said. The betrothal is necessary, but the news should be kept secret until their army leaves the Reach. Tywin said, but why, father? The news of an alliance will calm the city down, Cersei said. The silence isn't for King's Landing. It is to make sure the Starks do not hear so that we can take them by surprise with the size of our forces. Tyrion said. Tywin acknowledged him briefly before turning to Cersei. The death of Ned Stark was a witless blunder. You will keep Joffrey on a leash. If he were to hurt Sansa Stark, the wolves will never retreat. and if they attack King's Landing and the Tyrells turn on us, we will lose the city. I have tried, father, but he has become harder to control. Cersei said. Tywin spoke in a low voice. Rein him in. He will not harm House Lannister again. Before Cersei could declare Joffrey's loyalty, Lord Tywin and Cersei Adam left. Tyrion offered his sister a glass of Dornish red, but she stomped off. Another fine Lannister family meeting, and his father wondered why he drank. Tyrion doubled again the guards on Sansa Stark. 500 miles away, Jaime Lannister looked at the strange circles of black and white on his trencher. River Run celebrated Robb Stark's latest victory with 2 days of feasting, although the details were still murky. A third dire wolf had surfaced north of the Trident, and Jon Snow commanded wolves and ravens to slay Lannister knights. Jaime had never believed in magic or prophecies, but an entire army of beasts was hard to dismiss. He wondered whether these powers explained the defeats at the Whispering Wood or Oxcross. "What is this shite?" Jaime loudly called. "It is food, Kingslayer, and far better than you deserve," Sir Robin Ryger said. His uncle Kevin gave him a reproachful look. Jane-C, sitting on her mother's lap, stared at Yang-Sing, and Martin and Willem giggled. Yang-C shrugged and smirked at his cousins. He took a bite of the black pudding made of cow's blood, suet, oatmeal, and onions. The black circle looked like darkened dung, but it was meaty and heavier than sausage. He cut a slice of the white pudding, less salty and more creamy. Yang-C washed his food down with watered-down ale. Sir Ryder, the captain of the Tully Guards, spoke truthfully. In the hall of the small keep, the squires and western lords ate better than any could hope. Yama had seen the black cells in King's Landing windowless, with only dirty straw for a bed and not even a bucket to shit in. When he was captured at the Whispering Wood, Yama expected to spend the next few moons covered in shit and piss and half-starved, until his father ransomed him. Jinder wondered again what Snow was thinking. The Westermen knew that Robb Stark had given his brother full authority over prisoners. Many times Tallymen reminded the captives of the White Wolf's brutality at Oxcross, the Golden Tooth, and even at the Red Fork. But Snow had done nothing to the squires and knights at River Run, and the small folk had been released to the west. Diamond chewed the sausage, ignoring the faint tang of blood. Sir Kevin. The boy was garbed in gray and black, homespun wool and leather, like many of the Wintertown crew. But he was tall and fair with sandy gold hair and green eyes. Jaime looked more closely. The eyes were emerald green and flecked with gold, like a Lannister. The boy handed Cavan a scroll. Jaime's uncle opened it and gave a sigh of relief. Sir Robin stepped near and read the note. "We will take care of this. Sir, your wife and daughter will leave River Run on the morrow. I will send my own Squire Miles and 6 guards to make certain they get to the Tooth safely." Sir Robin said. "I thank you, sir," Kevin said. He took his wife's hand and smiled at Jane-C before turning to the tall blonde boy. "Were you at the battle?" "Ah, my lord." The boy flushed brightly, happy to share the tale. "It was a hard fight. I stood with the White Wolf north of the Red Fork. We turned back the mountain's men easily enough, but the van of heavy cavalry was much fiercer." "Who led the van?" the booming voice of Lord Craighole called out. "A knight with a burning tree sigil rode in the front, but there were thousands of brave men." Sierra Deity, Matterbrand, Jaime thought. He hoped his friend was alive. "How did the North win?" Lord Tywin had more men and knights, Tybolt Marbrand asked. Lord Tywin had to cross the Trident to return west. Maester Snow built an enormous wall to defend the north side of the Red Fork, 2 miles long and 10 feet high. We fought from atop the wall over ground, bursting with trenches, ditches, pits, and traps, until that battle. I could never have imagined such a field of death, the boy said. "And did Snow summon wolves and ravens?" Sir Cavan asked warily. "I do not know, my lord. There were wolves and ravens, but how they came, only the Maester can say." Another dire wolf joined Ghost in the battle and fought off several hounds. The wall nearly fell. There was blood everywhere. We were close to being overwhelmed, but Jon Snow won. He threw back everything Lord Tywin could send. The boy smiled proudly. Rosiemi had seen that look before. It was reckless and bold, just like his younger uncles speaking back to his lord father. Both Tyget and Geryon were kind to Rosier and Tyrion, but had strained ties with their head of house. "What is your name, boy?" Jaime said. Jerry, my lord. The boy bowed and then walked away. Jaime tried to follow, but Sir Robin Ryger and Tully guards stopped him. Before they did, he could see waiting outside the door a slender woman with long dark hair, green-brown eyes, and a broad smile when she embraced her son. He had not seen her in 13 years. Tasha, the crofter's daughter. Suddenly, Jaime knew why Jerry looked so very fair and green-eyed. He woke up to the smell of freshly baked bread. At the inn of the Crossroads, kitchen boys, their ranks swelled by new recruits, worked at all hours baking, boiling, roasting, braising, smoking, salting, and frying all sorts of victuals. Much went to feed the soldiers, but some shared with the starving small folk, as wagons of cooked food and raw supplies were sent to nearby villages and holdfasts. Bread was the staple, a simple, dense bread called hardtack, made of flour, water, and salt. Baked several times, hardtack was dry, tasteless, and lasted a long time. The bread was dunked in water or ale, fried in oil, or pounded into crumbs and eaten with soup. Jon heard Arya's laughter outside the tent as she played with Nymeria. Ghost stood vigilant, guarding the tent door. He drank a cup of water and poured the rest into a basin to wash. Jon, Arya saw his haggard face. I have bad dreams, sister, he said as he continued to wash. She bit her lip. Is it because of all that rubbish about Azor Ahai? Gendry says he met Thoros in King's Landing, and the priest was a glutton and a sot. Jon chuckled. I worry about many things, Arya, but not the prophecies of the Lord of Light. But Thoros has strange powers. They say he has raised Beric Dondarrion from death 4 times, Arya said. I don't doubt that magic exists or that prophecies may be true, but they are hard to understand. Daenerys Targaryen dreamed of the destruction of Valyria 12 years before the doom. We cannot stop everything for a priest's visions. I cannot be this prince who was promised if I fall in battle to our enemies, Jon said. Daenerys' tale of Azor Ahai is spreading in the camp, Arya said. Jon shrugged. Words do not win wars. Come, we have things to do. They walked around that morning with the dire wolves. The roads that met at the inn at the Crossroads swarmed with wagons pulled by plow horses. Off the main roads, horses grazed on the grass, and men sharpened weapons and waited for orders. The ferry landing at the inn had been restored, and several boats were tied up, and the boys hard at work fixing sails and oars. Barrels of thick black pine tar sat on the docks, the bitter smell drifting north with the wind. Next to the inn, an open field had been cleared of horses and tents. Even early in the morning, men drilled under the one eye of Beric Dondarrion. On the ground, there were spears, 17 feet in length, cut from stakes, scavenged from the fortifications built north of the Red Fork. Each pike had a broad steel leaf head reinforced with metal strip and a bronze butt spike to balance the weight. The pike was held in both hands, and soldiers practiced marching 10 abreast in several rows. The first rank kept their pikes low and ready to defend against a charging horse, the spike anchored to the ground. The next 3 ranks held their pikes level at the shoulder to deliver thrusts. Behind them, 6 ranks of pikes stabbed straight up in the air. Not all the men came from the brotherhoods without banners. Only a few dozen swore fealty to the Lightning Lord. Some were soldiers, defeated in previous battles, or deserters. Many were small folk who fled their homes and hoped for food to eat and a place to stay. And quite a few had been loyal to landed knights or minor lords, whose houses were now extinguished in the male line by the Lannisters. Woodshee, Cox, Penny, Hawick, and many more. Even Lady Went's few soldiers were in the mix, their captain Sir Willis Woad having been slaughtered by the Mountain. There were 400 men already, and more coming every day. Jon was not certain whether they joined him to seek redemption or to find safety in numbers, or from fear that he would hang them all. They were a motley crew with an odd mix of weapons and armor. Hence the constant drills with the pike. He would train them to fight in a disciplined formation, to march without losing cohesion, and to attack as one unit. Pikemen needed to stay close together for support, but not crowd each other. Lord Snow, the men have no shields. How will they face archers? Beric asked. On the sidelines, small folk and soldiers watched as the men drilled and marched. Highborns, including Lady Wynn and Lady Smallwood, were present as well, and other companies of men waited for their turn to practice with the pikes. Jon's voice carried over the field. They will not need a shield. If they train well, I will give them armor. A heavy steel helmet with a wide brim, a steel breastplate, and greaves to cover their legs. That was far better protection than most of the men in the army could claim. Should I learn how to train with a pike, sir? The boy had pale blonde hair and dark blue, almost purple eyes. A name day older than Arya, Edric Dane was shy and polite. Jon had spent little time with the Lord Barrack's squire, but the boy had courage. He pulled the dying Dondarrion out of a river and stood guard over the body during a battle with the mountain. The pike is not a weapon for squires. It weighs 12 pounds and must be carried at all times with both hands marching and in battle, Jon said. But Lord Snow, we wish to fight with you. An orphan from the inn cried. Jon wasn't sure if the boy was named Pede Wat or Elmo. There was at least half a dozen Pedes running about in the camp, and many more Wats and Elmos. It is not safe. It would be better if you stayed away from battle, Jon said. My lord, nowhere in the Riverlands is safe. My father, mother, aunts, and uncles were all killed at Wendish Town. Jon Penny said, and the other boys nodded. If we fight with you, we have a chance. We may not be as clever as your Wintertown boys, but let us join you. Jon sighed. I do not want any of you in danger. You will not fight in battle, but you can help the men. He pointed to the formation, a square 10 files wide and 10 ranks deep. In battle, men get confused. If you play music, the pikemen can march in order and stay in a line. Music, sir? Like a wood harp? The boy who he thought was Pate asked. Harps? We are not looking for silly love songs, Jon scoffed. No, a drum. You would beat a drum to keep marching in step. And you would have to learn other signals to stop, to go forward, to attack. You would learn how to send signals on the battlefield. The orphan boys glowed with excitement, and Jon sent them off to get drums made. He kept Arya and Edric close, like his sister. Edric was a skilled rider. He would prefer them mounted in any battle. Jon did not like the idea of boys the age of Arya in battle, but if the pike formation broke down and routed, all the footmen would be killed by cavalry. In war, sometimes the only good choice was still a bad one. The cacophony of drumming outside Jon's tent stopped suddenly. The flap opened, and Grey Wind entered first, followed by a grim Robb Stark. Jon stood up, leaving the letter to Lady Mormont at the Golden Tooth unfinished. Robb signaled for Arya to follow, and the three proceeded to the main tent. Several riverlords stood outside and gave their sympathies to Robb in passing. The Blackfish was comforting his niece and nephew inside. Hoster Tully has passed, Robb said. We received a raven from Riverrun this afternoon. Lysa never visited, and now he has passed, Catelyn said. Hoster Tully had been dying for many moons. The silence from the Vale was telling and boded poorly for Sarah Rover's mission. The rivermen will need to return to sea to the funeral. Hoster will sail down the Red Fork one last time to sink into the Trident. Many of the bannermen will return to River Wren. Lord Mallister, Blackwood, Bracken, Piper, and Vance will set the boat adrift, and Edmure, as the new Lord Tully, will shoot the arrow to set the sails on fire, Brynden said. I am sorry to hear, Uncle, and I will release your bannermen today, Robb said. But Robb, won't you attend as well? Catelyn said. Mother, I have a war to fight. I can best honor Lord Tully by freeing the Riverlands. Harrenhal is still in the hands of the Lannisters. We do not control the fields south of Haraway, Robb said. But Robb, you are the heir to River Run until Edmure has children, Catelyn said. I am a Stark. My place is at Winterfell. River Run is for the Tullys, Robb said. Cat, we should go. Hoster's liegemen are outside and will want to speak. Your son has the right of it. Your father was happy when the siege of River Run was broken. He will smile more from his watery grave if the invaders are driven from all of the Riverlands. Brynden said. Catelyn hesitated and looked at Arya. She retreated between her two brothers and had no intention of leaving their side or Nymeria. Lady Stark bowed her head and left with the Tullys. Robb waited and then signaled to his squire to make certain he was not disturbed. The Stark guards retreated, and the dire wolves guarded the tent. The brothers huddled over the map. I will leave tonight, after the Tullys depart with the rivermen. Robb said, Are you certain? I could go in your stead. The North looks to you for leadership, and your last trip to the Reach took a moon's time, Jon said. Rob shook his head. Jon, when I am gone, you have command, and you need to train these new men anyway. Besides, if we siege Harrenhal, you must deploy the artillery. Arya glared at her brothers with great annoyance. What are you two talking about? Jon raised his head. The Neck is 500 miles away from here, on the King's Road. I remember, it took over a moon to come down from Caelin with the king. But Jon noticed something. The Green Fork runs from the Crossroads to Greywater Watch, with winds blowing north and strong rowers. A boat can travel it in 4 days. It is less than 100 miles from there to Moat Caelin and the Fever River, Rob said. But that is all swamps and bogs, Arya said. Yes, but the Crannogmen know how to travel in bogs. They can go faster in their little boats than the Ironborn can cross on foot. Father said House Reed knows the Neck better than anyone, Rob said. You mean to go north and ambush them? That is why the dock was repaired, and Jon's crew fixed the ships, Arya said. Actually, I meant to go north, but Rob decided he would lead the men. Jon complained, only one of us can leave, and I am the Lord of Winterfell. The Ironborn wish to capture Moat Caelin, so they can raid my bannermen with impunity. I am going to stop them. I will burn Victoron, Greyjoy's ship, and see how squids fare in a swamp. Rob said, but you don't have many men? Arya quickly made the connections. The pitch, those barrels of tar on the docks. You are going to use them to set the long ships on fire. Rob nodded. I plan to take Manderly, Umbers, and Flints. The Flints know the Neck well. The Manderlys are sailors. And the Umbers, well, they enjoy killing squids. But you are not telling the Rivermen. Arya asked. The Greyjoys are attacking the north, and I will pay the iron price at Moat Caelin. I want the mission to be secret and not a hint until we are ready to burn the ships. Rob said. Jon has an equally important task. He needs to go south and take Harrenhal. It is a strong castle, and we need to make certain the Lannisters cannot return. Plus, the sellswords operated from Harrenhal. The area near the God's Eye was pillaged worse than the rest of the Riverlands, and that is saying a great deal. Jon said, the Sept south of Harroway have all been looted and the men and women killed or worse. This Vargo Ho is a torturer. His men are scum, just like Clegane's creatures. Rob said, Tywin Lannister does not care. He is happy to employ monsters. The only thing that matters to him is the glory of House Lannister, Arya said. Then make Tywin pay. Take the castle, Jon, Rob said. All right, be careful, Stark. No fighting shadow assassins with only a dagger, Jon jested. Grey Wind will be with me. And Arya, listen to Jon. Be safe, sister. I will see both of you soon. Rob embraced his siblings. He would do so again after nightfall, when he left with 3 ships, loaded with 100 men and barrels of pitch and tar. Arya Stark tried her best not to go numb as the army marched down to Harrenhal. Fear cuts deeper than swords. The land was gentle here, rolling hills and terraced fields interspersed with meadows, woodlands, and shallow streams. She remembered hiding, running, and the smell of burning. When she stumbled around the Riverlands, with Euron and after he died, every place smelled of fire. Farms, villages, castles, septs, barns, inns. It did not matter. If it burned, the Lannisters had burnt it. Since yesterday afternoon, the Northern Army, divided into 2 columns of infantry, supported by cavalry, marched from the inn at the Crossroads south. 1 column had gone on the King's Road to control the border with the Crownlands. Those men would turn right and meet them at the castle. The second headed directly for Harrenhal and included the new recruits. Her brother oversaw the pike squares, trying to march in tune to boys banging loud drums. The army was in fine spirits, laughing and jesting, boasting about their battle prowess. As the army passed, wisps of pale smoke emerged at villages, holdfasts, and keeps. Children, some shy, many wary, emerged from hills and forests and were given food and drink. Corpses were buried, walls rebuilt, and gates fixed. Life slowly returned to the Riverlands. Merchants and tinkerers traveled the roads, and farmers tried their best to get one last harvest before winter. Rhea bit her lip when she had been lost with Gendry and Hot Pie. No one had helped. The small folk, the highborn, they had all cowered and fled before the lion. No traveler shared a fire, and no place of safety was offered. You look thoughtful, little wolf. Daisy rode next to her in plate and with Morning Star ready. Many of Rob's battle guard went north on the Trident, but Mormont Eyre, Eddard Karstark, and Small John Umber stayed south. Daisy was no water dancer, but she gave Arya tips on fighting. When the Lannisters were raiding and killing, where were they? All these people, Arya said. Are you asking why the villagers didn't fight, or why you did not? Daisy said. I know it is not fair, but where were the men? Couldn't they have fought or helped me? Do you know what the women on Bear Island are famous for? Daisy said. Beating back raids. You won the tourney at River Run and defeated a Harlaw and a Lannister knight on the final day. Arya said, men fish and women fight attacks from Ironborn and wildlings. But the largest raid I ever saw was Lord Drum with 5 longships and 150 men. We hurled them back to his shithole island. But what if it was the whole Iron Fleet? What if 10,000 raiders landed at Bear Island? Daisy said. You would have to retreat into the forest or hide behind your walls. Arya said. These villagers had to flee. You cannot expect them to be brave against such odds. Only heroes are that way. Your father would never stop fighting to defend the North, and his sons, Rob and Jon, are cut from the same cloth. You will be too, little wolf, Daisy said. The Small Jon says, at the Red Fork, the North defeated 4 times their number, Arya said. The Small Jon can barely count, Daisy snorted. But yes, your brothers are unbeaten in the field, and the men know that. That is why the small folk have returned. The horses stopped, and Arya saw a cloud of dust coming from the west. A horde of men were marching to meet them. It was too early for the second column on the King's Road to rejoin the main force. Daisy urged her horse over, and Arya followed. Jon waited on a hill with Ghost under the banner of the White Wolf. Ragged men and torn banners approached. A few well-armed knights on horses were at the front, but the rest looked like a peasant militia. Most were dirty men in simple brown clothes, armed with cudgels and axes. A few had carved a 7-pointed star into their foreheads. There were a few children with scraped shins and curious yes. Jon Snow, a man with 6 white stars on a purple field, asked. Her brother nodded. And who are you? Sir Raymond merrily. Word has spread that you mean to attack Harrenhal. We would join you. We want revenge for what these bastards have done to our lands, the knight said. Natalie, isn't that a house in the Crown Lands? Jon said. Aye, the Mountain's men killed Lord Lorthab at Mummer's Ford. But since they have raided our lands, the one who led the soldiers had a manticore on his shield and slaughtered our chickens and sheep and tried to burn us out of my lady's tower, he said. And do you command these other men? Jon asked. A man in threadbare robes belted with a hempen rope stepped forward. No, my lord. I am from the septa nearby that was burnt down. The brothers that survived have come with me. There are villagers whose fields were ruined and other small folk from around the God's Eye. Yaxley waited as her brother examined them carefully. Only a few rode horses. Most were barefoot with no armor. How exactly did you expect to get your revenge? Jon asked. What do you mean? Sarah Raymond said. Harrenhal is a castle. You have no ladders, grappling hooks, or any way to climb the walls. You have no siege equipment, Jon said. A burly man with a hammer pushed to the front. We heard you was coming, and that you are good at killing. Jon held his hand. I am going to capture Harrenhal. But if you want to come, you must obey my orders. I will restore order in the Riverlands, and that means there is one voice. I speak for Robb Stark and the army. There will be no banditry, no dissent. You will follow my orders, or hang. The knights, the men of faith, and the villagers agreed. Arya crept closer to her brother. Do you trust these people, Jon? They might be spies for the Lannisters, or worse, Vargo Ho. Jon chuckled. I don't trust anyone, Arya. Well, you and Robb. Stay close to me, sister. The 3 ships docked at Greywater Watch, and Robb Stark greeted Holland Reed. The Crannogmen escorted them to a small but cozy hall. The taller Northmen had to crouch so that their heads did not hit the low roof. Lord Stark, my sympathy for your loss. Your father Ned was a good man, Lord Reed said. Thank you, my lord. Rogue handed over a leather tube. The men gathered closer to examine the diagrams on the scroll. What is that thing? the Great Jon said. It is Jon's design, he calls it a hellburner. You create a fire chamber on the ship with a floor and a roof. The pitch is packed into the chamber and covered with kindling and coal. These long wood plugs are hollow and full of wax. Jon says if you light one side, you have enough time to run 1,000 paces before the inner side lights and explodes, Rose said. So, this is a fire ship. But the Ironborn won't think much of it because it will seem like a regular canoe. Howland said, it seems only a small flame, but when the pitch is lit, everything explodes. Jon believes it should blow a hole in the hull of a longship. He also gave me these. Rob took out 2 earthen pots that were sealed. A bit of white dust could be seen on the outside. And what are those? Howland asked. I do not know. Jon discovered this when he was using limestone in the blast furnace. He says that when the pot shatters and this dust meets with water, a cloud of smoke rises that causes blindness and burns. Rose said, I plan to throw this at Victarion Greyjoy. Murmurs of sorcery and magic could be heard in the hall. Robe ignored the comments and waited for Lord Reed's reply. The ships are still in the Fever River. Arkady Boggs, my best scout, sent a message. Men from the Barrows and the Rills have attacked from the north and slowed the fleet down, Reed said. Have you seen the flagship? Rob said. The Iron Victory is the largest vessel. The sail has a golden kraken on a black field. Victarion Greyjoy will captain that ship with the best fighters of the Iron Fleet. Give me 2 days to transport you and prepare the fire ships. We will attack then, Howland said. They could see the twisted 5 towers of Heron's Folly on the horizon, and the pewter water of the God's Eye beyond. The blue and green water had turned into cold steel. Winter was coming, and the black swans and other birds had disappeared. The host had slowed down, waiting for siege machines, wagons, and the second column to catch up. The cavalry scouted the lake, checking the abandoned settlements to make certain there were no hidden Lannister soldiers. Arya sat at the fire next to Gendry, Squires, and the Wintertown boys. Nymeria had gone off to hunt with Ghost. Jon was in his tent, meeting with Garyon and Saturn, who had returned from River Run. Lord Beric and Thoros was on patrol, and Northmen sharpened and checked their weapons, preparing for battle. The town outside the walls had been burnt to blackened stone. That was where the Lannister army had camped while Arya was trapped in the castle. Do you think the Bloody Wolf will use the ballistas to destroy the walls? A boy asked. The weakest curtain wall at the castle was 15 feet thick. The towers rose over 150 feet tall. There were pits in the castle 30 feet deep. Harrenhal might be cursed, but it was monstrously hard to take, and her brother did not have dragons. I hear that Snow might turn into a giant raven and fly over the walls, Ep8 said. Rosier hoped that the boy could at least keep a tune drumming. Thinking was not his strong suit. Lady Arya, will you give me your favor? Edric said. This will be my first true battle. Gendry snorted. You have been with the Brotherhood for months. How did you not manage to do any fighting? Leave the boy alone. We have been in skirmishes. Ned hasn't fought, but he saved Sir Berk's body and guarded the horses, Harwin said. Right, without Ned, we might have all died against the mountain, Alyn said. Alyn was another Winterfell guard who joined the Brotherhood after being ambushed. He was sweet on Jane Heddle, who had nursed him back to health after Mummer's Ford. Alia did not understand how men, even her brother Rob, were such fools over nurses. It will be a hard battle. Sieges are never easy. Tom of Seven Streams said, How would you know? You have never been in one. A man with a green beard hooted. I will challenge Vargo Ho in single battle. They will call me the Goat Slayer. A man cried out. You are more likely to be a goat fucker, Greenbeard retorted. Arya was tired of all these fools. Even Lady Went would be better company, and she was always crying over how her men and servants were killed by the Lannisters. As Arya got up to leave, the she-bear rode into the camp. Where is Lord Snow? Daisy said. The Lannister banners have been struck from Harrenhal. There are bodies that have been thrown from the walls, and signs of battle. The Rosier took Daisy to Jon, and Eddard Karstark, Small Jon Umber, and many other commanders followed. Squires raced to get horses readied, and men rushed to don their armor. Rob could hear laughter ring out less than a few hundred feet away. They were at the head of the Fever River, hidden behind huge half-drowned trees. Even though streams and creeks ran into the fever, the water was green and covered with fungus. It was hard to tell the submerged logs floating in the water from lizard lions, cleverly hidden under twigs. 36 longships were beached on the rocks, and the largest flew the golden kraken on a black sail. "Why aren't there more ships?" he whispered. "Many ships are guarding the entrance to the Salt Spear, and the Barrowmen have managed to attack a few, so I suspect they have left some behind to defend against raids. They have also just arrived, so there may be more sailing east." Rob looked through the spyglass that Jon gifted to him. There were guards on the longships, but they all faced north. He rubbed Grey Wind and looked at the 8 fire ships, loaded with pitch and carrying long fuses. "We attack after nightfall. Prepare bows, arrows, and spears." "Will we be able to see Lord Stark?" Waxley Manderly asked. "Yes, by the fires of their burning boats," Rob said. They waited after sunset and the changing of the guard. There were only a few men watching on each boat. The Ironborn had chosen not to camp on swampy land, preferring to sleep on their ships. With luck, they would burn to death under their decks. Rob signaled for quiet as the Northmen readied the weapons. Several crannogmen readied the fireboats and lit the fuses as they pushed the modified canoes to the warships. The boats lurched unsteadily with the current, and the crannogmen noiselessly escaped on their skiffs, darting down behind rocks and trees with their short bows and spears. For minutes, nothing happened, as the only thin wreaths of smoke were seen drifting to the longships. The Ironborn turned and pointed at the boats with derisive laughter. The crannogmen's canoes were dwarfed by the mighty longships and barely made a dent. Then the world went on fire. The first boat exploded, ripping a hole into a longship. The air was filled with a rain of wooden shards, kindling and stone, intermixed with the heads, limbs, and bodies of the guards. Other boats burst into flame, and the screams of unseen men filled the air. Sails caught on fire, and holes could be seen where oarlocks had once been fitted into gunwales. The Fever River turned red with flame. Unarmored Ironborn rushed to the deck, their bodies illuminated in the night. "Fire!" Rob cried. Umber and Manderly men hurled spears from the shore. Flint archers aimed volleys of arrows at clusters of men gathered on the decks. Some men dived off the longships only to be stabbed in midair by 3-pronged frog spears or a Manderly trident. The fire spread from boat to boat as longships rammed into each other, trying to escape from the inferno. The Ironborn could not see into the darkness. The Northmen had no such problems. Ships began to sink with men still trapped underneath. Rob and Grey Wind crept closer to the largest boat. A loud bellow split the night as men tried desperately to put out the fires on the kraken sail of the Iron Victory. The furious scream came from Victarion Greyjoy, clad in lobstered plate mail, and Rob took the 2 earthenware pots and hurled it on the deck. The pots shattered, and a cloud of white dust billowed out. Ironborn screamed when the dust hit their skin, and men toppled on the floor, clawing at their eyes. The crew on the Iron Victory tried to escape the white smoke, and the deck became a miasma of confusion, even as arrows and spears whistled through the air into the Ironborn. Victarion Greyjoy growled and put on his great helm, shaped like a kraken. 8 tentacles stretched from head and chin, and the Lord Captain of the Iron Fleet jumped into the knee-high water. The sight astonished Rob. Victarion wore full plate mail, a heavy cloak with layers of gold cloth, a full helm, and a massive battle-axe in the right hand, and a large kite shield in the other. "I challenge you, Greenlanders, to single combat," Victarion bellowed. Rob held out his hand to Sadis Howland Reed. The Crandman handed over a net weighted with metal hooks. Grey Wind growled, and Victarion strode toward the dire wolf. Rob threw the net, and it landed squarely. Rob and the Grey Jon pulled, and Greyjoy was swept off his feet, landing headfirst into the murky water. Victarion struggled to rise, but Grey Wind pounced, slamming the helmet deeper into the mud, and Lord Reed stabbed his frog spear into the axe arm. Rob stepped forward as the Grey Jon held the head underwater. With Valyrian steel, Rob hacked the Lord Captain's head off, still in the kraken helm. He lifted it high in the air, blood dripping from the neck. "Here is your fucking iron price." Rob yelled at the longships. A wild cheer came from the Northerners. "Young wolf," they roared happily. The chant of Winterfell filled the night. The archers continued to release deadly volleys, but most of Rob's men waited on shore to meet their enemies with sword, axe, and spear. No quarter was given. The next morning, Jon waited a fair distance outside the main gate of Harrenhal. A white flag of parley had been hung on the gatehouse last night, but he preferred the light of day. Hornwood, Locke, and Nori held large tower shields, watching the walls in case of arrow or crossbow fire. Dacey, Small Jon, Eddard, and Beric were behind him. A dozen ballistas were manned by the Wintertown boys, and Jerry had returned to the crew after delivering Owen's raven yesterday. A pallid man with red-rimmed eyes and thin hair rode out on a black and white Zorse, followed by a fat brown-skinned Dothraki and a jester with a severed head at his belt. A tall, gaunt man paced above the gatehouse. He had a long, ropey beard, which dangled below his belt. "That is Vargo Ho," Arya whispered, pointing to the leader of the brave companions on the wall. Snow, the cadaver on the Zorse, said, "My leader would invite you to speak inside the castle." Jon shook his head. "You could pour hot oil on my men from the murder holes in the gatehouse. What does he want?" "To change employers," the jester giggled. "I am not in command. You would have to speak to Vargo Ho," the first man said. "Tell him to come down, then. Else there will be no parley," Jon said. "He will speak to you from the battlements," the cadaver said. 3 Carabalistas moved forward, pulled by mules. "If he attempts a shot, I will fire a few in return," Jon said. He moved forward with his guard. Vargo Ho spoke with a heavy lisp. "Say now, I have captured the Lannisters. I will give them to you if you let me go." "What happened with the Lannister men? And how many are left?" Jon said. "We had a disagreement. They did not want to live. I do." The goat had an ugly smile. "I have captured this lorch. There are 60 Lannisters locked up in the dungeons. Some of them may have lost a few parts." The 2 ugly men with Hote, one short, the other hairy, laughed. "What do you want?" Jon asked. "I have heard that you Starks care about honor. I vant an oath that none of your men will harm me, and that I will be allowed to leave Harrenhal." Hote looked at the other brave companions. "And my men will not be harmed by your Ziarzia." "Is Lorch alive?" Jon asked. "Yax and unharmed, but I wish to feed him to a bear." Hote said, "Very well, but you will come down and escort me through the gatehouse. You will not leave my side, and your men will put down their arms. In return, I swear on the honor of House Stark that you and your men will not be harmed by my forces, and that you will leave the castle," Jon said. Vargo Ho grinned, a look of triumph on his gaunt face. Jon walked back and prepared his troops to march into Harrenhal. In the tent, an outraged Sir Raymond yelled and screamed. The bitterness of the small folk in the Septons was clear to all, and the former members of the Brotherhood seethed with anger. Even the Northmen and squires looked uncomfortable. Only Dacey, Eddard, the Small Jon were unbothered, and the Wintertown boys were outside, readying wagons. "Vargo Ho is a monster. He is a torturer and a killer," Beric said. "My lord, I wish to reclaim Harrenhal, but not to let these murderers go free." Lady Shella said, "What did you promise, Sir Beric? Have you forgotten your words? You all swore an oath of fealty. The entire Brotherhood, and Sir Beric, you vowed to follow me, as did the Septons and the small folk. I hold you to these pledges. My men will do no harm to Vargo Hote and the brave companions. Anyone who disobeys will hang." Jon said to much grumbling. He talked to the Small Jon and Eddard quietly. The 2 men listened and then left the tent. Jon pulled Arya and Dacey close. "Arya, stay with me. Keep needle ready." With the goat at his side, Jon walked through the great gatehouse. He had been here before, long ago, in another life. He remembered the Kingspire, the slagged stone, and the arching stone bridge. He remembered the sight from high up the tower, looking over the deep blue of the God's Eye. The goat lisped and slobbered, prattling on about bathhouses and dungeons. Jon could only make out one of every 3 words, as Hote's chains of coins clinked. Northmen surged into the castle, securing every gate, the main barracks, and the Hall of the 100 Hearths. Jon passed many frightened servants on the way to the middle ward. "And this is the bear pit," Hote declared. The arena below was substantial, an oval 30 feet by 15 feet, walled in stone and floored with sand. 6 tiers of marble benches overlooked the bear pit, and Jon could see traces of dried blood in the sand. "Who are they?" Jon said, pointing at 3 squirming figures. They were naked and hairless, shaved from head to toe, and tied to wooden stocks. They were separated by crude wood blocks from the main pit. "I have saved some girls for you. These ones slept with Lannister men. You may have first use," Hoat said gallantly. Jon calmed Daisy down with a look. The she-bear had stayed close to Arya. The room was full of sniggering brave companions. There were at least 15 of Hoat's followers. They were outnumbered, though, by Jon's battle guard and dozens of burly Karstark and Umber men. "Where are the prisoners?" he asked. Vargo Ho smiled like the ringmaster of a circus. With a wave of his hand, an old servant brought out a sobbing pale man, naked except for ropes around his neck and hands. Amory Lorch was portly, piggish, and pathetic as he begged for his life. 5 other Lannisters were dragged out, bound together. Some had lost their foot and others their hands. Jon called out to the burly man in front, who still stood proudly and glared at Hoat. "What is your name?" "Sir Harrock of Cunning," the strong man said. He had been beaten about the face, and his right arm ended at the wrist. There was still blood, so the right hand had been severed recently. "Tell me, Sir Harrock, can you still use your left hand?" Jon said. The big man nodded. That was sufficient, he thought. Jon motioned to Eddard and the small Jan. The youngest Karstark brought out an ivory warhorn and blew a blast. The small Jan grabbed Hoat's arms and forced the Koharok down to the ground. All around the room, Umber and Karstark overpowered and restrained the companions with sheer numbers. "What is this? You swore on your honor," Vargo Ho yelled, "that my men would not harm you, and that is true, they will not." Jon said, "Lord Snow, we will hunt down the other scum, but what if they resist?" Eddard asked. "If they attack you, they violated the promise. But I want them captured, if possible," Jon said. The younger Karstark and his men rushed out, spreading to all parts of Harrenhal. In a short time, the Northern army captured the remaining sellswords. An ugly squat man attempted to escape, but Ghost dragged him down, taking care not to kill. Jon waited as they marched, the brave companions, with the servants back to the bear pit. He was surprised that there were less than 24 of the latter for such an enormous castle. There were another 40 small folk, but it was not clear if they were prisoners or had served willingly. When most of the castle was herded into the middle ward, Jon began, "I swore an oath that my men would not harm the brave companions, and that is true, but the Lannisters are not my men." "Sir Harrock," Jon called. "You are the bloody wolf," the knight said, eyes bulging. Jon nodded. Hoat was tied up in rope and gagged. The gag was taken off before the small Jon and Eddard lowered him into the bear pit. "Vargo Hoat, you shall receive the same terms you gave others. Sir Harrock, your men have my blessing to proceed. I want the goat dying, not dead, and to be dying for a long time. Before his death, he will leave Harrenhal as promised." Sir Harrock grinned and hobbled to the gibbering goat. He picked up a loose stone in his left hand. The screaming began soon after. Jon turned to Chet. "Do we have stakes and rope?" "Some, my lord, but not enough ropes. But we could use their clothes to tie them fast to the stakes." "You just have to rip the clothes into shreds first," Chet said. "We don't need stakes. There are trees around the lake. We could use those," Clytus added. "Smart lads." Small Jon. "Lower more men into the pit. This should not take all day. Jerry, bring in a wagon so we can transport this scum out of the castle before they die," Jon said. "Couldn't we use the bear? Would be faster," Small Jon said. "No, I want them to die outside. And besides, it is cruel to the bear. Bring Lorch out of the pit unharmed. I have plans for him." Jon turned to the servants. Like many in the room, they were in shock with fright. "Now tell me, how exactly did you serve the Lannisters?" The servants stammered and stuttered. Most kept their mouths shut, their eyes down, and their words unintelligible. A few pointed fingers at others. Goodwife Amabel blamed Wyas for leading her astray. Goodwife Hera, an even older woman, begged for Lady Wyn's kindness. Pink Eye prayed to the seven as the screaming from the pit got louder. Gendry stood up and shouted to be heard. "Lord Snow, the Smiths have done nothing wrong. Lucan and Ben Blackthumb just make swords, shields, and horseshoes. They made them for the Wents. the Lannisters, and everyone else in this castle. True. It is hard to hear over these sellswords. They do not seem brave now, Jon mused. He pivoted again to the servants. Will you serve Lady Wynne faithfully?
Of course,
my lord. The first to speak was the obsequious Maester Tothmere. Jon wondered if the man was assigned by the Citadel or worked for Tywin Lannister. His loyalty was dubious. The others rushed to agree. Daisy brought the 3 naked girls from the pit with scraps of cloth over their private parts. The prettiest one, a buxom brunette, fell immediately to her knees. My lord, please spare me. I will do anything you ask. Anything. The other 2 were too terrified to say a word. That one slept with Lannister knights and a brave companion. She is a harlot, Amabel cried. What is your name? Jon asked kindly. Pierre, me lord. I work in the buttery. No one will harm you. If any man touches you, I will geld them and then hang them. Now get dressed, the 3 of you, Jon said before turning to the other servants. If I see any mistreatment of small folk, I will not be pleased. You do not want that. Jon dismissed the servants and asked that dinner should be served at the usual hour. He also wanted a full inventory of supplies and weapons, particularly siege equipment, to be given to Chet. The northern lords, rivermen, squires, and small folk looked on with stunned horror as the brave companions were brutally dispatched. Broken legs, shattered arms, tongues ripped out, teeth smashed in, entrails removed. Shit and blood was everywhere on the sand. Lord Snow, what do you plan to do with the Lannister prisoners? Smaldon asked. Find out from lords who foraged and burnt the villages. All the men who followed him will die. Very few Lannister men will be alive by nightfall, Jon said. My lord, should these men not receive a trial, a man should not be slain unless his crimes have been proven, Cedric said. Those are your words. I have no desire or patience for trials by combat or pretty words. In any land, justice can have only one master. Otherwise it is chaos and rule by force. Outside, all of you were hungry for blood. I have given it to you, and yet you complain. The riverlands will be cleared and scoured clean. No more bandits, no more crimes, no more looting. Jon said. The faith of the Seven says that a man may ask for trial by combat. A Septon said timidly, Are all Septons great fools? If that was Ser Gregor Clegane who raped your daughters, burnt your lands, and slaughtered your men, would you allow him a trial by combat? So he can escape to more killing? These monsters roamed the riverlands for many moons. Your gods and lords were of no help. They will be in the 7 hells by nightfall, Jon said. The first 12 brave companions were dying. Northmen pulled them up by rope and loaded them on a wagon. A defrocked Septon and a disgraced maester begged for mercy and asked for a clean death. Jon looked at the shabby cauldron and shook his head. The bloody mummers would reap what they sowed. The wagon left the castle, trailed by Septons, Crownland knights, small folk. The Wintertown boys and Jon Snow had gone ahead. He was guarded by the dire wolves and a company of umbermen. Vargo Ho was given special treatment. The goat was crucified on a cross, his hands and feet nailed into the beams by a Lannister prisoner. The other brave companions were tied to trees and left to die. Jon asked that each man be hung 50 paces apart. By the afternoon, a forest of screaming, mewling men had sprung up outside the God's Eye. It stretched for miles, a wall of dying men, and villagers and townsfolk gathered in awe to see their tormentors tormented. Jon raised his hands to the sky, and clouds of ravens flew down. The carrion birds feasted on living flesh. Tyrion Lannister sat with the rest of the small council in the Red Keep. He had thought his sister's presence as Queen Regent had been bad enough. That was before Joffrey had started to attend. Now, every session devolved into ranting and screaming with the other members attempting to curry favor with the boy king. There was not enough wine in King's Landing or even the entire Arbor to make these meetings palatable. A small child dashed into the room, avoiding Saruman Moore and Saruman Trant. The boy handed a piece of paper to Varys and disappeared. The spider read the message and then clucked in alarm. What has happened? Cersei shouted. Jon Snow has taken Harrenhal. The Northern Army is now only 200 miles away. The Stark banner has been seen far south on the King's Road, as Sow's Horn, Varys said. Joffrey's face turned a mix of red and white. His nephew was furious and afraid. Tyrion thought, how did he take Harrenhal in a week? My father left a garrison. Tyrion said. I cannot say, Lord Hand. My little bird reports that Jon Snow crucified hundreds outside the castle. He cut off hands, feet, tongues, and cocks. Ravens ate the eyes of prisoners while they were still alive. Perhaps Snow fed the goat to a goat. Varys tittered at the poor joke. He is only 2 days away. Where are the Tyrells? Where is Lord Tyrell? Joffrey yelled. I am certain your good father is coming as quickly as possible, Bayash said. We have called the banners in the Crown Lands. Duskendel and Stokeworth are sending levies to join your grandfather. Tyrion said, but those men should be in King's Landing defending his grace. After all, they swore fealty to the throne, not Casterly Rock. Baelish smirked. Lord Baelish is right, I am their lord. They should defend me, Joffrey ranted. Sweetling, they are needed in the field, Cersei said. I am their king, Paxel, send a raven. I want them as my personal guards, Joffrey said. Tyrion would have slapped his own head if he wasn't drinking wine. The stupidity of the powerful astonished him. The guards at the Red Keep were carefully chosen for loyalty. Now Joffrey wanted unknown strangers patrolling the halls. He truly was an idiot. Your Grace, you should meet soon with the Tyrells. Their demands are considerable. We need to be certain of their absolute loyalty. Baelish said the betrothal had yet to be announced, per Tyrion's Lannister's clear orders. What do you mean, could they betray us? Joffrey asked. The wolves are clever. The might of Highgarden must be turned against the Starks. If they were to conspire together against your Grace and the throne, Baelish said. Joffrey turned a deeper shade of red. Tyrion sighed. His Lord Father would not like this at all. Tyrion returned to the Tower of the Hand. The meeting ended with Cersei trying to calm Joffrey down. Even Baelish claimed surprise at the depth of the king's rage. Tyrion had always known his oldest nephew had a horrible temper, but his sister had hidden it well. Temperament did not improve with a crown. When he entered the small hall, Bronn and Podrick waited at a table with sellswords. Podrick had already bought out several bottles of Dornish Red and Arbor Gold, and poured several goblets. Tyrion did not need Bronn's glare or Podrick's pained expression to realize this conversation would be unpleasant. Have you heard the news? They say that, Bronn said, Jon Snow has taken Harrenhal. Tyrion said, he drank one goblet and reached for the second. It was remarkable how fast the story traveled. Either Varys was the source, or other groups like the Faith had spies at the castle. Perhaps both were true. What are you going to do? Bronn asked. Tyrion waited for the muttering of the sellswords to stop. What can I do? I will not march to Harrenhal. You have me confused with Akken the Conqueror. I am a bit shorter, I do not have 2 wives, and no dragons. Unlike you, I have been doing something. Bronn said acidly. Podrick, being her out. The girl that Pod escorted from behind the screen might have been pretty, had she not looked like a little mouse. She was skinny, with dark hair and small-bosomed. Her brown eyes were hollow, and she could not meet his gaze. She was skittish. No, she was scared to death. Something terrible had happened to her. A loud cry came from the corner, where a beautiful girl knitted in the sunlight. Jane? Jane. Sansa Stark rushed over. The girl began to shake and sob and threw herself at Sansa's feet. Please, my lady, please, save me. Jane whimpered on the floor like a kicked dog. Her tears soaked Sansa's dress. What have you done to her? Sansa demanded. She wrapped the girl in her arms. Tyrion felt hard-pressed by this turn of events. Being the hand of the king was not as glorious as expected. He glared at Bronn. The sellswords stared back hard. We found her at Baelish's brothel, the one off the Street of Silk near Fishmonger Square. Baelish's man Jones refused to talk until I cut off 2 fingers. Her name is Jane Poole. Littlefinger had some crazy plan to sell her as Arya or Sansa Stark, Bronn said. Tyrion wondered who would name himself Jones. Was that a first name or a last one? Then again, Bronn had no compunctions about killing small folk. In all likelihood, this person was taking in the harbor. Did anyone else see you? He said. Bros shook his head. We stole some gold from the strongbox and took some records. It will look like the man ran away with her. Tyrion doubted that Baelish would think that. Lady Sansa, who is this Jameson Poole? Our steward's daughter, the queen, mounted his head on a spike with my septa. Sansa said, My lady, they forced me. To be with many men, I didn't want to. I swear, Jane cried. We found her naked, with a chain about her neck tied to the wall. She was on her back, and her legs were... Bronn stopped. He might be a whoremonger, but the sellsword had no desire to torment the girl further. These things happen in war, Tyrion said, and reached for another goblet. She is my best friend. How could Baelish do this? How could anyone be this cruel? Sansa hugged Jane Poole tightly. Tyrion remembered Lady Tisha of House Silverfist, whose sigil was a gold coin and 100 silver stags on a bloody sheet. My father is a greater monster than Littlefinger, he thought. Bronn wrenched the wine goblet from his hands. Did I got you the girl. Use the brains that you are famous for, Bronn said. Lady Sansa, is Jane Poole friendly with your brothers Rob and Jon? Do they care about her at all? Tyrion said. Sansa scrunched up her pretty face. She was fond of Rob, but my brother preferred sparring and hunting than speaking to my friends. As for Jon, he was a bastard and everyone treated him as such. Sansa said. Tyrion steadied himself. Lannisters did not groan. They had an alliance with the Reach, and the famine in King's Landing would soon end. Littlefinger's schemes troubled him, but if Cersei controlled her herd, they could follow his father's plan and send the Starks north. The Tyrells would control the small council, but the Roses were not dangerous, as wolves. Perhaps after the war ended, he could take a tour of the Free Cities or Dorne. Are you saying that she has no fucking value to your brothers? Bronn asked. She is a steward's daughter, not a lost princess, Tyrion snapped. He grabbed a goblet and drank some much-needed wine. The valuable part is learning of Baelish's scheme, not the girl. My lord, my brothers care about the fate of all the Stark servants. My lady mother and Rob knew the worth of Valon Poole, and Jon, he was always kind. He will not hold the words of many years ago against Jon, Sansa said. The girl may still have value. The Starks think that the entire household was killed by Cersei. The news of a survivor will buy us some goodwill, but we must keep this Jane hidden and find a way to send a secret message to the Northmen. Tyrion said, I knew you were good for something. Bronn said. He handed the dwarf a bottle of Arbor Gold. Everything in war took longer than expected. 2 days passed before they had sorted out the castle, searched the towers thoroughly, accounted for stores and supplies, and compiled a full list of Lannister prisoners and the small folk enslaved at the castle. Maester Tothamor and Brewmaster Tuffleberry had been helpful, but he didn't trust either man at all. Jon Snow sat in the Great Hall, named the Hall of 100 Hearths by Hair the Black. He counted less than 40 fireplaces, but the room was immense, large enough to hold many thousand men. He had decided against using the solars in the 5 massive towers as an office. For one, those rooms were far from the ground and required a long walk. For another, he despised Harrenhal. The less time spent in the ruined towers, the better. He preferred the small section of the hall, cordoned off by Winterfell guards, where he could held court with Arya and the dire wolves near. Milord, Jane Heddle curtsied low and handed an envelope sealed with the Stark direwolf. Rob had sent a raven from the north and addressed it to the inn at the Crossroad. The older Heddle sister, eager to see her lover, Aling, had ridden down in a day. Jon read the message. Thank you, Lady Heddle. Smalljian, tell the men I will address them at dinner. I want all hands in the hall, and every knight and commander. Is it news from the north? Smalljian asked eagerly. Jon smiled. Yes, quite good. You will be pleased. But for now, I have many things to do. Before he could leave with Ghost, Darren Hornwood and Sir Raymond merrily walked over, dragging a villager, perhaps of 1 in 6 name days. Hornwood spoke first. Lord Snow, this fellow is a spy for the brave companions. He joined Sir Raymond and the Septons to report on your actions. Milord, please, they took my sister. They said they would kill her if I didn't report back on you. The boy cried. What happened to the girl? Jon asked. We found her in a cell underneath Widow's Tower. Dead a long time. Sir Raymond said. Jon sighed. They are all dead, I suppose. All of the brave companions. Chet nodded. I wish they were alive so I could make them suffer. Release the boy. Wait, how did you send a message to Vargo Ho? He wanted to know if you would keep your oath. If I knew you was lying, I was to raise my left hand. I thought you would honor the promise, so I raised my right, the boy said. I did keep the promise. My men did not harm him and he left the castle alive. Jon said, let the boy go. Harrenhal has seen enough blood for now. Jon walked the yards alone. Even Ghost stayed away. running with Nymeria. The castle was an abomination. A cruel man built a cruel castle, and the horrors still plagued the Riverlands 300 years later. There were always monsters in this world, and men needed tools to kill them. Aegon Targaryen's weapon was Balerion, but Jon had no dragons. He walked by the barracks where men drilled and took their meals. Pikemen tried to charge en masse for a few hundred feet and stop. They had improved and could end the run without skewering each other. He passed the ruined God's Wood with a heart tree that seemed to glare with hatred from its terrible eyes and twisted mouth. He arrived at the smithy, a long building shaped like a tunnel, with 20 forges and water troughs to cool heated metal. He ordered the building sealed so that no one could watch. Jon started the largest forge and picked out the tools bellows, a hammer, and tongs. For 4 years, Jon had studied metallurgy, the secrets of extracting and working metal. The maesters of the Citadel claimed they had solved the riddle of steel using charcoal or limestone to transform iron. The more charcoal, the harder the blade and the sharper the edge. But there was a problem. The harder a blade, the easier it would shatter. Not like glass, but it would become notched, chipped, and blunted. A sword had to be sharp to deliver the killing blow, but flexible enough to absorb force. The metal could not yield when attacking, but had to bend on defense, and the blade had to be balanced and the weight evenly distributed. The maesters of smithing believed the answer was pattern welding, forging different layers of steel and iron together to create hardness and toughness. Thin layers of patterned steel were overlaid onto a soft iron core to create metal that could hold an edge but still bend. Skilled bladesmiths treated the steel many times, repeatedly heating, twisting, hammering, and folding until impurities were removed and ripples emerged from the layers. Jon admired the craft, but the maester and the smiths were wrong. With time and skill, pattern welding produced a good sword, but not a great one. Valyrian steel required something more. The forge was red hot now. Jon unwrapped the sheepskin and took out the slender blade. At River Run, from a pure ingot of steel, he hammered out the blade, cooled the metal, filed off the sides, and quenched and tempered in hot oil. It would make a fine weapon, but he could make better. The secrets of Valyrian steel had been lost in the doom, but there were obvious clues. Valyrian steel handled incredible heat and was dark, nearly black. No folding or pattern welding could achieve those two qualities or match the lightness of the metal. Only magic could do that. The magic of dragons. The legends claimed that Valyrian steel was forged by dragon fire. Jon believed it was something rarer and more precious, dragon blood. "Kill the boy, let the dragon be born." Those were the words Brynden River whispered in his dreams. Jon waited until the sword had turned orange-red. Then he took a knife and cut his hand and his arms. The blood dripped down and the blade smoked, the steel melting and burning. He took the hammer and tongs, and even as the drops fell, Jon beat the steel thinner. The fire burned hotter and fiercer, and the blade began to ripple and darken. There were no spells or songs, just his lifeblood bleeding on the steel. The fire was so hot that Jon was surprised it did not sear his wounds shut. He did not burn, though, even as the flames shifted from orange to yellow to blue, while the blade became dark gray and the whorls flowed like water over the surface. "I am the blood of the dragon, and this sword was crafted with my blood." When he finished, Jon held up the blade and examined the ripples where his blood had melted. He set a red stone on the crossguard and attached the pommel of a gold she-wolf. The night, the men assembled in the Hall of the 100 Hearths. Lady Shella, when sat proudly, restored to the great chair at the high table of Harrenhal. But every man, woman, and child in the castle knew who held the true power in the castle. Jon Snow stood up, and all eyes were on him. "My lords, ladies, and knights, we have received news, both good and bad. I will tell you the dark words first. Mates Tyrell has betrothed his daughter Margaery to Joffrey Baratheon. Highgarden is now aligned with the Iron Throne," Jon said. "Isn't she married to Renly?" Lord Cerwyn shouted. "Not anymore. We must prepare to face the swords of the Reach," Jon said. "But the Reach has tens of thousands of men," Lord Snow, the Riverlands Knight, said. "Aye, it will not be easy, but the young wolf leads us in battle." And the other message, Robb Stark went north with Flint, Manderly and Umbermen to fight the Ironborn at the neck. He burned their ships, cut off Victarion Greyjoy's head, and sunk the Iron Victory. "There are 1,000 Iron Men dead on the Fever River," Jon said. Wild cheering filled the room. The next battle would be hard. but for now, the North roared over his brother's success. Jon slipped away. This feast belonged to Lady Wince. Ned Stark followed Nymeria to the Godswood. He stood under a sentinel tree, with ghosts prowling around the dark-haunted grounds. "Jon, I received your message," her brother smiled, and handed her a sword and a scabbard. "My name day. You did not forget?" "Of course not. I promised to forge you a true sword. This is yours," Jon said. Arya gasped when she drew the smoky gray blade, so dark it was almost black. The sword was light and slender, with distinctive ripples. She made several cuts and thrusts, marveling at the speed and balance. "Is this Valyrian steel?" "As close as I could make it." Jon mounted on a tree, a heavy steel breastplate. The armor was worn but still strong. The sigil was a black bat on silver and gold. Strike. Arya lunged forward and thrust the sword at the plate. It pierced an entire foot through into the trunk of the sentinel tree, and when she stepped back, the blade came out effortlessly. A slender hole, an inch wide, could be seen at the point of the thrust. Sergio Forel told her that all men were made of water. Had the target been a man, the water would gush out, and they would die. She gazed at the sword with wonder. "This is a blade to slay monsters, little sister, not to fight squires or spar in the yard," Jon said. "Does it have a name?" Arya asked. "Graham, the Sword of Heroes. It is the name of a legendary blade from ancient Valyria." "What does Graham mean?" Arya said. "Two meanings, sister. The first is sorrow. Heroes do not live happy lives. But the second name is better." "Wrath," Jon said.